Hello everyone and welcome to another JavaScript Mastery video. This one is quite special because I have an extremely useful project to show you. We're going to build a fully functional e-commerce application. While building it, you're going to learn many advanced React and JavaScript topics, as well as how to use Stripe for cart transactions, how to create an interface using Material UI, and how to create a scalable React folder structure. On top of that, at the end of this video, you will have this unique and complex project that you will be able to add to your portfolio, or who knows, maybe use as your own e-commerce store. And trust me, e-commerce projects are impressive. This video was made possible by Commerce.js. Usually, to create a fully functioning web shop, you'd need to spend weeks and even months building it. Thankfully, using Commerce.js, we just have to build the front end and use their API for everything else. It's amazing. I'll show you how to use it in this video. Now, allow me to give you a quick demo of the entire application. As you can see, we have all of our products visible in this modern storefront. We'll be using Material UI to achieve this look. Every item has its price, and we can add as many of them as we want to our cart just by clicking this icon. We just added one lamp, let's add a keyboard, and let's also add a mouse. Let's say we are done with shopping and we want to check what's inside of our cart. In here, you have a nice overview of all the items in the cart. You can increase or decrease the quantity, remove the product, or empty the cart completely. After you're ready, we can move to the checkout. Let's add all of our shipping details. In this case, our name is John Wick. We live in 47 Paris Hill Lane in California. What's really important to notice here is that we, as the store owner, can choose which countries do we ship to and what are the shipping costs. By default, I've set it to France here, but of course you can switch to United States. And then, as you can see, all of the subdivisions are populated. So for example, if we switch back to Portugal, in here you can see the subdivisions of Portugal and the international shipping costs of $10. But if we switch back to United States, these shipping subdivisions are repopulated. We can choose California here, and also the shipping options are changed to domestic. Finally, we can go to payment details, review our order, and enter our payment information. For this, we're using Stripe. Stripe has a demo card that we can test on, and the demo card's card number is 424242. 424242, and you guessed it, 42. Then you can keep pressing 42 for the CVV and for the zip code. That's it. After we entered our demo card or a real one, you can click pay. And that's it. Our transaction has been made. But that's not the end. Commerce.js will also send a confirmation email both to our customer and to the store owner. Let me show you. This is the email that the store owner gets. It just lets him know that somebody made an order for $140. But if we go to the John Wick's email, in here you can see all the details. You can see if his item has been shipped, you can see his name and shipping details, and you can also see the complete order summary. Also, just so I don't forget, the application is fully mobile responsive. It looks like it's made for mobile. We can view all of our items here, we can add them to the cart, we can check out the cart, everything works, and finally, the form itself is fully mobile responsive. And that's it. This was a short demo of the application. Are you excited to start building it? Let's start right away. As always, we are starting completely from scratch, so you can head to your desktop and create a new folder. You can name it anything. In this case, let's do something like e_commerce, just like that. Then what you want to do is open a clean Visual Studio Code window. And finally, just drag and drop that e-commerce empty folder in here. Once that is done, you can head up in here, go to View, and then finally to Terminal. That's going to open the built-in terminal. Inside of here, as always, you can just run npx create react app /. This is going to initialize a new React application inside of the e-commerce folder you just created. I'm going to wait just a minute for this to install, and I'll be right back. The first thing we're going to do is install all the necessary dependencies so we don't have to go back and forth installing one by one. npm install, and let's start with add material-ui/core and also add material-ui/icons. Then we can also install add chec/commerce.js. This dependency is going to be the most important one here. That's going to be managing our commerce. Then we can also install add stripe/react-stripe-js and add stripe/stripe-js. Then we also have React router DOM, as well as the React hook form. And I think that's going to be it for now. If we need anything else, we're going to add it later. And now that I noticed this line is quite long, so I'm going to actually leave this in the description so you can just copy and paste and not bother with misspelling some of these names here. I got you there. Again, while this is installing, I'll be gone for a second and I'll be right back. And we're back. To start off, we're first going to delete the entire SRC folder because we don't need most of these files. So just go ahead, right click and delete it. Then you're going to create a new SRC folder, and in there you can create a new index.js file. We absolutely need to have this index.js file, so just feel free to do that. In here, we'll do just the usual stuff, import React from React, and also import React DOM from React-DOM. Finally, we're also going to import the app. So that's going to be import app from /app. It doesn't exist yet, but we're going to create it soon. And finally, React DOM.render. In here, the first parameter is our actual app component, which is going to be our entire application. And the second argument is document.getElementById, and that is going to point to our root div. Great, that's it. Just for a second, if you're not sure, let me show you where this root div is. So I'm going to head to public, and then in here, in this index.html. This is usually just a bit messy, so I like to clean this up, delete these, delete all the comments, and easily you'll be able to see that the only thing that we have in here is just a title, and in here we have our div with an ID of root. While we're here, let's also change this to e-commerce. And what you can do is also change this link to the icon. Feel free to add any favicon image you want. Great. Now that we're here, we're ready to create our app.js component. Inside of here, we're going to create a functional component. We can do that using RAFCE, which allows us to easily create functional components. And most of you guys have been asking me, which extensions do I use? So let me go to extensions and let me show you. In here, I use some of the basic ones like auto rename tag. That's going to allow me to switch the name of the tag like this. Then I also use bracket pair colorizer that simply colorizes the brackets so I know where which one is ending. We have a few for different programming languages, but this is the one you want to have. ES7, React, Redux, GraphQL, snippets. So after you install that, you'll be able to run RAFCE, and that's going to give you this component automatically. Great. Now that we're here, let's say e-commerce, and this is going to be our demo component. Now with this, I think we are ready to start our application. Let's go ahead and simply say npm start. If we've done everything correctly, our app should start on localhost 3000. And there we go, we are live. As you can see, just small little title here, e-commerce on the top left. That means we're good to go. Now we can close our terminal and start creating the layout. First things first, we're going to create a components folder in the SRC, and inside of there, we're going to create a products folder. Great. Inside of that folder, we're going to create a new file, and the name is going to be products.jsx. Inside of the products.jsx component, we're going to start creating our products layout. So we can import React from React. We can also import grid from add material UI /core, and that's going to be it for now. finally, we can create our products component. That's going to be const products is equal to a functional component. And don't forget to export it at the bottom. Export default products. Great. Now inside of here, I'm going to create a main. This is basically just like a div, but it has some meaning to it. Then inside of there, we're going to add a grid. That is the Material UI grid, which allows you to kind of put your items in a grid. This is going to be the grid container. So you can type container in here and say justify is equal to center. This is going to justify the content in the center, and we're going to give them a spacing of 4. Now inside of here, we can put our actual products. So for now, we're going to just mock the products. Later on, we'll be fetching them from the Commerce.js API. So in here, let's create a few products. Just at the top, I'm going to create a products array. And then inside of that array, we're going to have a few products. Each product is going to be an object, and it's going to have its own ID. So we can say ID1. It's also going to have a name. So in here, let's say shoes. It's also going to have a description. So let's just say description is equal to running shoes. Great. So this is our first product. And the second one is going to be the same. It's going to have the ID of 2. It's going to be a MacBook, for example. And inside of here, we're going to say Apple MacBook. Great. Now inside of our container, we can use the opening and closing curly brace to indicate that we'll be writing JavaScript logic inside of the JSX. And then inside of here, we're going to say products.map. In here, we get each product. And now for each product, we want to return something specific. So what do we want to return for each product? Inside of there, we're going to have a grid. This time, our grid is going to be of type item, and it also needs to have a key. In this case, the key is going to be product.id. Every time that you're looping through something in JSX, you need to have the ID. Inside of there, we're also going to say XS is equal to 12. This means that this is going to take full width on mobile devices. For small devices, it's going to take 6 spaces out of 12, which means that 2 of them will be in the same row. And then for medium, we can do something like 4. And finally, for large, we can do 3. Great. So this is now our grid component. We, of course, have to close it. And inside of our grid, we can put our product component. So this here is going to be a singular product component, which we didn't create yet. We're going to create it soon. So this is it. Now, of course, we have to create that component. So just inside of here, inside of components, I'm going to create a new component, which is going to be called product. More specifically, I'm going to put this product immediately inside of the products because that's the only place where we'll be using it. In here, you cannot see really well, but what's happening, our product is inside of the products folder. Our product is also going to have a product.jsx file. Inside of here, we can use that trick I showed you, RAFCE, and that is immediately going to create a React functional component for us. Inside of our product, we're actually going to have all the layout for one specific product, meaning the image, the description, the title, and everything else that goes with it. So we'll have to import quite a few things from Material UI. In this case, that's going to be card, also card media, card content, card actions, typography, and finally icon button. These are all the things that we're going to import from Material UI in this file. So we can say from add Material UI /core. And also we'll be using one icon. In this case, that's going to be add shopping cart. And this is coming from add Material UI /icons. Keep in mind that these are named imports, so all of these have to be named exactly like this. If you want to see what each component does, I would strongly encourage you to take a look at the Material UI documentation. You'll be able to find more details about each one of these components, and for the icons the same thing. Great, now that we have these components, let's start creating our card. So our product is going to be a Material UI card. It is just a card component. And also, we'll start adding some classes right here. For this whole project, it's not about CSS, right? I don't want to bore you with CSS. So I'm going to provide you with all the CSS styles for it. For now, I'm just gonna let you know what are the names of the classes for each specific element. So in here, we're gonna have a class name of classes.root. Then inside of the card, we're going to have a card media, which is going to be a self-closing tag. That card media is going to have a class name of classes.media. Finally, our card media needs to have the actual image. So we can say image is equal to, and then in here, we have to provide the image that our card is gonna have. So this here is gonna be the image for a specific product. Unfortunately, we don't have one, so I'm just gonna leave this blank for now. Later on, once we fetch the actual products, you'll be able to see that image right here. And also, let's give it a title. The title is going to be product.name. You might be wondering, where is this product coming from? Well, since product is a subcomponent or a child component from a products JSX, we're calling it right here. And we can pass some props. In this case, it's only going to have one prop, which is going to be the entire product we're looping over. So you can see in here we have two mock products and we're looping over them and we're sending each one by one. So inside of the product JSX, we'll have access to the product.name, product.id, and also product.description. Great, so in here, that's how we got this name. Moving further, we're going to have a card content just below this. Card content is not going to be a self-closing tag. Inside of there, we're going to have a div. That div is going to have a class name of classes.cardContent. Inside of there, we're going to have a typography. Typography is used for any kind of text in Material UI. In this case, this typography is going to be a variant of H5, which means that it's a medium-large heading. And also it's going to have a gutter bottom, which simply means it's going to have some space on the bottom. Inside of there, we want to render our product, more specifically, product.name. Just below that, we're going to have one identical typography, so we can copy this one. It's also going to be the variant of H5. It's not going to have the gutter bottom though, and in here, we want to render the price. For now, our products don't have the price, so let's add it. In here, I'm going to add a price to each one of these products. So I'm going to say price, and we can do something like a string, and we can say $5, and this one is going to be $10. Great. Now inside of here, we know that we can reference product.price. And you can see it's red, which means that we still haven't imported it. Of course, it's coming through props. So we could either do this, props.product.name, props.product.price, but not to repeat ourselves. Remember the dry principle, don't repeat yourself. We're gonna simply destructure the product from the props. Great, so now we have our products. Don't worry about the classes, we're gonna figure that out later. Moving on, below this div, we're going to have another typography. This typography is going to have a variant of H2, and it's going to have a color of text secondary, which means it's going to be a bit grayish. Finally, in here, we're going to have our product.description. Great. Moving on, below the card content, we're going to have card actions. Card actions is going to have a prop of disable spacing and also a class name of classes.cardActions. Inside of our card actions, we're going to have an icon button, and that icon button is going to have the area label, and that's simply going to say add to cart. So if for some reason we cannot see the button on some user's screen, they'll be able to read the text. For most users, we just want to show the icon. So inside of the icon button, I'm just going to call the add shopping cart. And this is our icon. Later on, we're going to hook this button to the add to cart function from Commerce.js. I see that I misspelled the icon button at the top, so I'm going to solve that. And now the last thing to solve is to import these classes. So what are these classes and where are they coming from? Inside of our product folder, I'm going to create a new file. In this case, that's going to be styles.js file. This is going to be the file where we're going to style these components. I'm going to write this only once for people who want to learn this, but later on, I'm just going to give you all the styles so you can simply copy and paste them. The link is going to be in the description. You'll be able to find each styles.js file separately. And also, if you're stuck with absolutely any error, the link to the GitHub project is going to be down in the description. Even if you don't have any problems, make sure to go there right now and give this project a star. Great, so that's it. We can import something known as make styles. It's a named import from add material UI. This time it's going to be /core, but also /styles. Great. Now the only goal of this file is to say export default, which means we'll be exporting something, and that something is the call to the function make styles. Function make styles takes in one parameter, and that is yet another callback function inside of there with an instant return. So what you do with an instant return, you wrap it in parentheses, and then you return an object. Inside of this object, we're gonna write our styles. And the styles are gonna be written in CSS in JS kind of way. For example, we have this classes.root. Let's see how that's gonna look. What you have to do is specify the name of the styles, and then in there, you need to say max width in this case, and we're gonna set it to 100%. So this is how you do it, not with dashes in between. You do it in camel case, and all of the things on the right need to be inside of strings. I know, it's not ideal, but that's just how it is with Material UI. And trust me, if you follow these rules, your life is going to be so much easier. Great, so now that we're exporting this, we can go back inside of our product.js and see how we can actually make use of these styles we created. The only thing you have to do is import use styles from /styles. So these are our styles. And then inside of there, you can see this already starts like a hook, right? Use styles. So what do we do with hooks? We say const something, in this case classes, is equal to use styles, and then we call it. This is going to allow us to have our styles. If you save that, you can see we have no more errors, and that is it. Now, if we go back to style.js, just with a bit of copy and paste magic, these are gonna be the styles for our specific component. Only for the product.js. We're gonna have a new specific styles.js file for each specific component. This way, you don't have 1,000 lines CSS file, you're gonna have multiple ones, so you know which files refer to which component. As I said, from now on, I'm gonna be just copy and pasting all the styles, but don't worry, just head to the description and you can follow along. Great. This is it for our product.js file. Remember, we're using it in here, so we have to import it inside of our products.js. So inside of here, import product from, that's gonna be /product/product. If all of this is okay, we can head back to the app and actually show the products component. So we can say import, and that's going to be products from /components, and then /products/products one more time to get into this component. I told you we're gonna focus on the scalability and better folder structure, so later on we're gonna definitely fix that, and I'm gonna show you a much better way of importing components. Great, but now we just wanna have one simple products component rendered right here. Let's save it and let's see if it appears in the browser. Okay, so looks like we have just one small typo right there. Looks like that in the product, we're using a default import where we should be using a named one, specifying that we want to have a grid component from the Material UI core. If we save this, we should be good to go. That's it for the grid. And of course, in here, we have to have a return statement. So I'm gonna write a return statement. And finally, just put this main right there so that we know that our component is returning something. Let's see if our product is returned. It is. So when this compiles, we should be able to see our products. There we go, our cards. But this doesn't look too good. We're missing the image and also our description is too big. So give me a second and I'll find the images for both the MacBook and the running shoes. Okay, so the only thing I did was just add the image URL right here as another property inside of our products array. In here, we have the image property. And now going to the product, what we're gonna do in here, instead of this empty image, we're gonna say product.image. And also I noticed that we put here h2, but this should be body2. That way it's gonna be a bit smaller. If we save this and go back, there we go. This looks much better. But trust me, once we add real products and real images, this is going to look even better. After the products are done, we can of course create our navigation bar. So right click the components and then inside of there, create a navbar folder. Inside of the navbar folder, create a navbar.jsx component. You can use JS, you can use JSX, but mostly for components that contain JSX, I use the JSX extension. Inside of there, you can write RAFCE, as we always do, or just simply create a normal functional component. And then in here, we're gonna create our navigation bar. It's gonna be a bit of work because our navigation bar is going to be fully mobile responsive. In here, we'll also need to import quite a few things from Material UI, and that's going to be app bar, toolbar, icon button, we already saw that, something known as a badge, that's the little thing representing how many notifications or how many items do you have. Then we have a menu item. We also have the menu itself. And finally, typography. As we learned, we use that for any text element. And all of that is coming from add material UI/core. Inside of here, we're also going to have one icon that's going to be import shopping cart from add material UI/icons. Now let's create the layout of our navbar. In here, we can leave this as a div, but we can also put it as a just empty React fragment. Inside of there, we're gonna have a component called app bar, which is basically a navigation bar. It's going to have a few properties. The position is going to be equal to fixed. Class name is going to be equal to classes.appbar. And color is going to be equal to inherit. Inside of there, we're going to have a toolbar. That toolbar is going to have a typography. This is going to be our logo and our brand. So in here, we're going to have an image and also the name of our shop. So what we can do is we can say image. That's going to be a self-closing tag. Image, of course, needs an src, which we don't have yet. And then we can have an alt tag. In here, we can say the name of our shop. I'm going to call mine commerce.js. And also it needs to have a height. So I'm going to leave the height to 25 pixels. And let's give it a class name. We can say class name is equal to classes.image. This is our image. And just next to our image or below it, I'm going to put the name of our brand, commerce.js. You can call this anything you want. This is your own shop. Feel free to make it your own. Great. Of course, this typography has to have some kind of variant. So it's going to have a variant of h6. And also it's going to have a class name of classes.title, as well as color is equal to inherit. Now we got to figure out what are we going to use for our image. I already prepared something, but feel free to find your own image on the web. Usually what you do is inside of the src, you create the assets folder, and then inside of that assets, you put your image. So in this case, I have a commerce.png, just a simple icon image. Inside of here, I'm gonna import that. So import, we can call it logo from /assets and then /commerce.png. I just noticed it's not going to be just // it's going to be // and then assets and then commerce.png. So now we can use this logo right in here. Great. This is going to appear on the left side of our navigation bar. In the middle, we're going to have a self-closing div, which is simply going to have a class name of classes.grow. That means that this div is going to take as much space as we need. So we're going to have this on the left, as much space as we need, and then finally something on the right. And the thing on the right is going to be another div. In this case, it's going to have a class name of classes.button. Inside of there, we're going to have an icon button. That icon button is going to have an area label of show cart items. And it's also going to have a color of inherit. Inside of there, we're gonna have a badge. Our badge is going to have a badge content property, and that is going to be equal to the number of items that we have. So how can we know that? Well, right now we cannot. So let's just say 2 in here, but later on that's gonna be coming dynamically. Then the color of the badge is going to be secondary. And inside of the badge itself, we're gonna have the icon. And the icon is simply shopping cart as we specified above. Let's not forget to import the styles. So inside of the navbar, I'm going to create a styles.js file. And as we mentioned, we're simply going to copy and paste all the styles. Then what we need to do is the same thing always, just import use styles from /styles. You can just copy and paste this. And finally, as we mentioned, you're gonna get used to it. Const classes is equal to use styles, and you call it as a function. Great. This is only half of the navigation bar, but let's go ahead and see how does it look like. The first thing you have to do is import it inside of the app.js. So what we can do is we can say import in here navbar from /components /navbar /navbar. You can see that we have a lot of repetition here. And later on, once you have 3, 4, 5, 10, or 100 components, this is gonna get really messy. So let me show you a much better way to import all of the components inside of the app.js. We're gonna import it like this. Inside of here, we're gonna have just one import statement, and we're not gonna be importing components separately. So how do we do it? We can say import, named import products, and navbar, named means that it's inside of these curly braces, from /components. That's it. Take a look at how simple this is. It simply makes sense. /components, give me the products and give me the navbar from the components. So now we can get rid of this. But for this to work, we have to do one thing. Inside of our components, we need to create an index.js file. From this one index.js file, we're gonna export all the other components. And this is how we do it. Export default as navbar, and then outside of the braces from /navbar /navbar. So now we're moving all this boilerplate code right inside of here. And we can do the same thing to our products. So in here, export default as products from /products /products. And now our app is gonna know where these things are coming from. Of course, now we can render our navigation bar right on top of the products. Finally, let's save it and go ahead and see how does it look like. There we go. Take a look at this nice navigation bar. We have our brand right here, and we also have our cart. Looks pretty good. It also has the number of elements in the cart, which we're gonna make dynamic, of course. And looks like I was wrong. We were not half done with it. We're fully done. Let's take a look how does it look like on mobile. I'm gonna open inspect element and click toggle device toolbar. And take a look. This looks really responsive. What we have to do is we have to add the height of this navigation bar as a margin to our products, because as you can see right now, our navbar is hiding our products, and that's not something you want. So let's head to products and see where the problem is coming from. I just noticed that we don't even have the styles for the products. So inside of the products folder, I'm gonna create a new styles.js file. And you already know the drill. Copy and paste the styles, go back inside of the products, and then in here, simply import. Import use styles from /styles. And then just on top of our products, const classes is equal to use styles and call it as a function. Now in here, what styles do we want to add? First of all, our main is going to have a class name of classes.content. Below that, we're going to have one self-closing div. That div is going to have a class name of classes.toolbar. And this is going to add the height the exact amount of pixels that the navbar has. So it's gonna push our content just a bit below. And looks like that's all that we need. If we save this, let's go ahead and take a look how does it look like. And there we go. Our content is pushed just a bit down and we have this nice grayish background. We're done with the navbar. Now that we're done with creating the basic layout, we can start fetching real products from our Commerce.js store. To do that, we can go back to our code, and inside of here, inside of the src folder, you can create a new folder called lib as library. Inside of there, you can create a new file called commerce.js. Inside of here, we're going to import commerce with a capital C from add commerce.js like this. This is what we installed previously. Now we can export const commerce with a lowercase c is equal to new commerce. We're basically creating a new instance of that specific commerce, and that is going to be our store. Now inside of here, as the first parameter, we need to put our public key from their store. To do that, of course, we have to go and create a new account in the Commerce.js. So once you're on the commercejs.com, I'm going to put the link in the description, you can go ahead and click Get Started. For you, there's going to be one step prior to seeing this, and that's going to be a question with what do you want to log in. Is it GitHub, is it Google, or simply by email and password? I already did that, so it's already asking me to create a store. So just go ahead and register and you'll be right at this step, which is creating the store. In here, you can specify the name of the store. We can do something like commerce.js. Then in here, you have your merchant email, and below you have your primary currency. In this case, it can stay as USD. Now you can click continue. We're now in there. They gave you this nice setup guide, but we're not gonna use that because I'm going to teach you how to do everything. So inside of here, we already have our orders. The first thing that we have to do is find our own API key. To do that, you can go under developer and settings. So that's on the left side, fourth icon, and then settings. In here, you can find your own public key. What you need to do for now is simply copy and paste it. We're gonna copy it, go back to our code, and now we're not simply gonna paste it here. That wouldn't be good. We wanna store all of our API keys somewhere else. Developers create a new file for that. The file name is going to be .env. This is a special hidden file which is not going to be pushed to GitHub. It stands for environmental variables. These are variables that only you can see on your PC. In here, we're gonna create a new variable, and that is going to be react underscore app underscore check underscore public underscore key, just like that. A long name, but we know what it is. And now in here, you can paste your own key. Great. Now, how do we get access to that key from here? Well, you simply need to say process.env dot and then the name of the key. In our case, that was react underscore app underscore check underscore public underscore key. You can name it anything you want, but it needs to start with capitalized react underscore app. Great. Now for this to take effect, we have to restart our terminal. So in here, we're gonna start npm start one more time. You close it with Control C and then start it again with npm start. We also need to pass one more argument to this new commerce, and that is going to be a Boolean value of true, meaning that this is going to create a new commerce store. Great. Now we have this object that we can use all across our application. So what can this commerce instance do? Well, let me tell you, usually for creating a fully functional web shop application, you would need a full backend API with all the routes for fetching the products, creating the products, deleting them, updating them, selling them. You need authentication and a lot more things. All of that is stored in this little instance, and that is going to be import commerce from, now we know where it is, /lib/commerce. This is it. We're going to be using this commerce instance to do all of our backend stuff for us, allowing us to completely focus on the front end. So first thing we want to do is maybe fetch the products. So inside of here, let's do exactly that. Inside of our app.js, I'm going to create a new state, const products, and then we also, of course, have the set products. and that's going to be equal to use state, and by default our products are going to be equal to an empty array. Of course we have to import the use state from React, so let's do just that. And now how do we populate these products? Well, of course we sometimes have to fetch it. So first let's also import the use effect. We're going to use that to fetch the products immediately on the application load. So just right here, we're going to create a new function called fetch products. And that is going to be an asynchronous arrow function. So async and then arrow function. If you haven't worked with async functions before, it is just like using that then and that catch, but the code looks much more cleaner and looks much more like synchronous code. So what do we want to do? Well, we want to fetch something. We want to fetch the response from await, so we have to await something, and that something is going to be a specific API call to this commerce instance. And it's going to be as simple as saying commerce.products.list, and then you call it as a function. This is going to return a promise, so we have to await to see what is inside of that promise. Once we get a response, we can destructure the data from that response. And this data is going to be our products. So for now, what I want to do is I simply want to say set products, and then we're going to set the data inside of the products. Now our products are going to be populated. But as you can see, right now we're not using products, they're never being used, and we're also never calling this function. So let's first call this function. To do that, I'm going to create a use effect call, more specifically a use effect hook. This use effect hook is going to have its dependency array set to empty, which means that it's only going to run at the start on the render. In class-based components, this was called a component.mount. Inside of here, we can use that function call and simply say fetch products and call it. This is going to call our commerce product list and set the products to the state. Now we can console log the products, and we can head back to the browser and see if we have anything in here. I'll open the console by right-clicking and then clicking inspect. And there we go. First we get an empty array and then we get back undefined. So let's see what's wrong. I wasn't even expecting anything, because if we go back to our commerce.js and go to products right here, the second icon, you'll be able to see that our products array is completely empty. We haven't added any products yet. To create a product, you can click this add product button on top right. And then inside of here, it is as simple as entering the name, the description, SKU, which is just a specific ID, and the quantity of the product. In this case, may the product simply be something like a keyboard. I'm gonna leave this SKU empty, it's gonna auto-populate it. Same thing for quantity. If you don't put quantity there, it's gonna have an unlimited quantity. And description can be something like Black Magic Keyboard. In here, you can set the price. You can specify a price like $65, but you can also specify pay what you want. In this case, we don't want that. And now I'm simply going to grab an image of some kind of a keyboard. Let me do that. And there we go. As I told you, it is as simple as that. Finally, this is going to be a physical product, so we have to choose the shipping options. In this case, by default, we can enable it in the United States, but let's say that you want to have worldwide delivery with some different shipping fees. We're gonna save this now, and let's head to the shipping section to see what else can we do there. To go there, you can head to this fifth icon right here and click shipping. In here, you can see that we have one zone right now, which is United States, but you can add another zone. In here, we can say something like international. For the international, we can of course add countries. Let's add a few countries from Europe that have a lot of regions. For example, Albania. We can do Austria, Bosnia, Belgium, and so on. Let's just scroll down and add a few more. Let's add Switzerland, Germany, Denmark, Spain, and I think that's gonna be enough for now. As you can see, you can add absolutely any country in the world, and their API automatically fetches all the regions for that specific country. I'm gonna show you what I mean in a second. Now we can add these countries. They are now added to the international zone, and finally, you can specify the international shipping. So in this case, let's do something like $10. And you can click Add Shipping Zone. Of course, we have to specify the name. we're gonna say international. If you do that, you're gonna see shipping zone added, and now we have domestic, $0 for shipping for United States, and also international. Now we can head back to products. We can head back to the keyboard we just created. And inside of here, now you can add that international shipping to all of these countries. And as you can see, it has a base rate of $10, and then you can specify additional shipping fees for this product. But all products in the international zone are going to have the base rate of $10 for shipping. Great, that's it for our keyboard. Let's save it and then head back to our website to see if we can see it there. Right here, I'm gonna refresh, and for now, we just expect to see a console log. And would you look at that? In here, I'm gonna make this just a bit bigger for you. We have first an empty array on the load, of course, and then we have one object inside of there. And as you can see, this is our product. Commerce.js automatically created all of these things. Create a date, description, has digital delivery, images, is it active, is it not, the name, the permalink, the price, even the formatted price, the shipping options, and everything else you might need. So this is our product. Now let's add a few more products to make this look just a bit nicer. I'm gonna head back to adding the products, go back to the products, and now I'm gonna add a few more. I'll just add all the products that I had in my original shop, but feel free to add absolutely any products you want. Your shop maybe can have a specific purpose. It can only be for keyboards, or only for headphones, or only for absolutely anything you want. Maybe you sell some art as well. So feel free to really personalize it, add your own products, play with it, and see what else, what other fields can you add to the products. You can also see that they're covering SEO, so you can specify the search engine title, description, definitely something you need in your e-commerce store. For now, most likely I'm going to speed this process up for you. I'm just gonna add 8 basic items. And there we go, our 8 products are here. Of course, you don't have to add all of them, you can have just one for testing, but it's nice actually seeing something in the shop while you're doing it. If you want to, I'll post the link to my deployed version online so you can take a screenshot and just copy all of these items. But again, just feel free to make it your own. Now, if you refresh this page, we should be able to see 8 different products right here. And as you can see, our array is now filled with 8 objects. Now, instead of these 2 mock products, let's actually display all of the real ones. To display the products, we have to pass them as props to our products component. And you might be wondering, why do we have our products in the app if we only use them in the products? Well, we only use them in the products right now, but later on, our cart and most of the most important things are going to be inside of the app, so are the products. So with that said, let's now pass our products as a prop inside of the products function. We just did that, and now if we go to products right here, we can now get the products right here as props. Of course, we can immediately destructure them and use them like so. We no longer need these mock products, so we can just delete them, and now we're mapping to the real product. For each product, we are sending that specific product object inside of our product component. So most of the work now is going to be done inside of the product component itself. We can head there and see what's happening. We are receiving the product, and now maybe not all of the things that we had here, like the name and the price, are going to be identical, so we have to check what does each one of these specific objects have, which properties. Maybe it's not going to be the name, maybe it's going to be product name, or maybe title. So let's take a look and see if everything is good. This here should be product, and just so we don't get an error, right now I'm going to return simply a div that says test. So we're not going to be returning this whole thing. I just want to first see what is actually inside of the product. Great. So now we can head back. And if we refresh, we should be able to see that we get 8 different console logs. And there we go. This looks quite bad right now, but we actually do see 8 tests, and we can see each object. So which properties do we need from each one of these objects? Well, we're definitely gonna use the name here. The image is actually under media and then source, and price. Where is the price? Price and then formatted with symbol or formatted with code. Now we have to actually use these properties. So let's go back and make these changes. I'm going to remove this now. And in this case, inside of our image, the image is not going to be simply product.image. It is going to be product.media.source. Product name stays the same. Then inside of here, we have product.name, that is the same. In here, we can say product.price, and then we have formatted with symbol. So we can take that and we can simply say product.formatted with symbol, but I think I'm missing the price before. Great. Then inside of here, we're getting product.description, so we can see how that looks like. And for now, I think that is going to be it. So let's actually save it and see how does that look like. There we go. As you can see, this already looks so much better. You can see in here we have some HTML tags. We don't want to have that. We just want to have a simple description. So how can we solve that? Well, we need to render that HTML as a real HTML. Instead of simply rendering the description as it is being returned as HTML, so we have to actually render these HTML tags. To do that, you can go inside of this typography and say dangerously set inner HTML. That accepts an object, so feel free to put one curly pair brace and then one object inside of it. There we have underscore underscore HTML colon product.description. So this is basically going to say to render our description. Then we can go ahead here and remove this description and make the typography a self-closing tag. Just like this. Great. So now let's save that and see if our HTML tags are gone. And would you look at that? All the tags are gone. This now looks like a real e-commerce shop. One that sells keyboards, kettles, books, coffees, everything basically you need. Great. So now what do you think is our next goal? What would you do next? In my opinion, maybe making this button clickable and actually making the cart dynamic makes sense. We have to be able to actually add these items inside of our cart. To start using the cart, we have to first, of course, create it. And that's again done by Commerce.js. So right inside of here, our cart is going to be yet another state in React. More specifically, it is going to be an object. So in this case, we can say use state and then say cart and set cart. And by default, that cart is going to be equal to simply an empty object. Now we have to see what is in the cart. So to do that, we're going to create yet another function, const fetch cart. That is again going to be, you guessed it, an async function. And inside of there, we can basically do a really similar thing. Const, in here we get some kind of a response. We always do from an API call. So what we can say is await commerce.cart.retrieve. And then we call it as a function. As you can see, I think you can start noticing the pattern. Commerce.something.something. It is that easy to get the items from the list, to get the cart items, to actually add the item to the cart, to buy everything. It is as simple as using the simplest API. No need for backend at all. Great. So in this case, our actual response is the cart. So we can say const cart is equal to await commerce.retrieve. And now inside of there, we of course do set cart. And finally, just set the cart. Inside of here, this is kind of redundant because we're creating a variable and then simply reusing it down there. What you can do is not even create a variable, but simply immediately use the value of this API. And that's going to allow you to simply call setCart, await commerce.cart.retrieve. That is it. This is basically getting the cart and then immediately setting it to the state. As you can see, our fetch cart is declared but never used, so what we can do is just after we fetch the products, we can immediately fetch the cart. As we did the last time, let's simply console log the cart to see what is in there. Here's our cart. At the start we get cart does not exist, but then later on our cart is populated. Our cart has a creation date, the currency, discount codes, expires, and a lot of different things. But the thing we're looking for is line items. In here are going to be all the items we actually add to our cart, and the subtotal. In the subtotal, you're going to have the total price of the items that are currently in the cart. To add the items to the cart, we're going to create yet another function. Const handle add to cart. This is going to be the function that's going to add the products to the cart. It is going to be an asynchronous function, and it's going to accept two different parameters. The first one is the product ID, and the second one is the quantity. So how many products do we want to add to cart? And what you have to do there is, again, do the same thing. Const, we get some kind of a response, is equal to await commerce.cart.add. And what are we going to add to the cart? Well, we're going to add a product with the product ID like this. And how many products are we going to add? We're going to add the quantity amount of products, and I just took a look and I misspelled it. So to recap, our handle add to cart is expecting two different params, the product ID and the quantity, and then we use these params to pass them over to the API and to add the product to the cart. The thing that we get back is going to be the item, and then finally in here we can update our cart, so set cart to item.cart. So this is the cart after the item has been added. Now we don't want to use this handle add to cart here because in the app you can see we have nothing, we don't have any buttons. Where we want to use it is inside of products component, more specifically product, singular product. But now let's pass it over as a prop to products. In here we can say on add to cart is going to be equal to handle add to cart. Now we know that our products is accepting a on add to cart prop, and that is the function that's going to add our item to the cart. Now, where do we use it? We don't have any buttons here as well. Well, we're gonna pass it as a prop one level deeper into our product. Now, if we go to the product, in here, we know that we are, again, getting the on add to cart handler, and what we need to do is simply call that on the button click. So right below, this is our button, cart actions, and then we have the icon button. So on that icon button, you can say on click, and what is going to happen on click? Well, we're going to call the on add to cart. So we're going to add to cart our element on click. Now what I want to do is I want to actually console log the cart after we change that, after we add one item. So we're console logging it here, and I'm interested in seeing if it's going to change once we click on that specific thing. But I think we forgot something. We don't want to call it like this because it's not going to know which thing are we adding. So we have to make it a callback function so it doesn't call itself immediately. In here, we want to call the on add to cart, and we need to pass two parameters. Remember, the first one is the product ID, and we have that stored under product.id. This is a specific individual product. So for each one, this is going to be different. That way, when you click this button, it's going to know that it's for the kettle, or when you click on the keyboard, it's going to be for the keyboard. And then the second thing is the quantity. And in our case, the quantity is always going to be 1. We add items one by one. Of course, you can modify this, but for now, this is all that we need. Now, if we go back and refresh, we should be able to update the cart depending on the click. For now, you can ignore this badge on top right. Remember, this is still static. We haven't changed that. But now, if we clear the console and click here, we get a new cart that has line items, and in here you can see we have one item in there, and that item is the kettle. Of course, let's add a keyboard, and then we get a new updated cart that now has the line items of 2, and has that keyboard inside of it. How simple is that? Now we have to use the data from the cart to display a dynamic icon right here. To do that, we're of course going to head to the navbar, and then in there, we somehow have to get the information about the cart. Of course, what we're going to do is go back to the app and then simply pass it as a prop. So we can say total items is equal to cart.total items. That is simply going to be a number of items in the cart. Now that we are passing that, we can go back to the navbar. We are now expecting that prop right here. And where is our badge? There we go. In here, badge content, we just changed that to total items. And that's gonna be it. If we now go back and refresh the page, you're gonna also notice one thing. Our cart is not going to be empty. It remains, it persists. That's what API is doing for you. That's why Commerce.js stores everything. You don't have to worry where you're going to store the items. So now we already have two. That is kind of deceiving because we had two fake ones before, but take a look at this. If I add the book gets added. If I add the coffee or the mouse, this number right here gets updated, and our full cart also gets updated with the items that we add. Great, now we have the data for the cart, but what we have to do is create the layout for the cart. So what happens once we click on this button? We have to be able to see all the items that we currently have in the cart, and we have to be able to add more items, remove some items, or just head to checkout. Let's start with creating our cart layout. Inside of the components folder, we're going to create one more folder, which is going to be named cart. Inside of the cart, we're going to have a cart.jsx file. This is going to be our cart component. And as always, we can do a React arrow function component with exports, RAFCE, or simply import React, create a constant, and then finally export it. At the top, we're going to import container, typography, button, and grid from @material UI core. Now let's create the layout of our cart. Inside of here, we're going to wrap everything with a container component. It is like a simple div, but Material UI provides some spacing, paddings, and so on. We also have to have that div, which is a self-closing div, remember, of a class name, classes.toolbar. So this is going to be the same one, the one that simply pushes the content a bit more down so that it appears under the navigation bar. We're going to add the classes after we're done with the layout. Below that, we're going to have a typography. That typography is simply going to say your shopping cart. And inside of there, it's going to be of a class name, classes.title. And a variant is going to be equal to h3. Below that, we're going to have two different options. We're going to have some kind of a variable, which is going to say const is empty, just like that. Const is empty. And in here, we'll have to figure out the logic if our cart is empty or not, and then we'll display different content based on that. If the variable is empty, so if the cart is empty, then using the ternary operator, we can show, for example, an empty cart. So I'm going to say empty cart. This is going to be a subcomponent we're going to create. Else, we're going to show, let's do filled cart. So these are our two functional components. And we can create them right here inside of our cart. These are just going to be simple elements. So what we can do is we can say const empty cart. It should be cart, not card. Empty cart is equal to a function or a functional component, which is simply going to return some kind of JSX. So let's render that. If the cart is empty, in there, we're going to have a typography. That typography is going to be of a variant subtitle 1. This typography is going to say, you have no items in your shopping cart. Start adding some. Exclamation mark. There we go. So this is if we have no items in the cart. And if we have some items in the cart, then we want to render a normal cart, and that cart is going to be a bit larger component. So we can say const filled cart is going to be equal to a functional component. Don't let this layout mess with you. These are not, let's say, subcomponents of a component, functional components, and so on. This is just a normal function that returns some JSX. And because of that, we can call it like this. What you could have done is simply say generate empty card and then call it in a different way. But this way, it is easy to see that these are like subcomponents. At least they appear to be. But this is just a function which is returning some JSX. Great. So this here is our filled cart. And that filled cart is going to have an empty fragment. Inside of that empty fragment, we're going to have a grid because we'll have to render all of the items. Inside of that React fragment, we're going to have a grid. That grid is going to be of type container, and it's going to have a spacing of 3. Inside of there, we'll have to loop through our cart items. So right now, we don't have any cart items, but we don't even have the cart here. So let's pass our cart through the props from app.js to our cart JSX. Inside of here, we have our cart in the state, as you can see right here. So the only thing we have to do is, first of all, well, call cart right here, right? So inside of here, instead of the products now, I'm gonna simply call the cart. We're calling the cart component, and we're gonna pass the cart as a prop. Right now, I commented out the products component, but later on, we're gonna implement React Router so we can actually navigate between the products and the cart. So far, we just wanna see how the cart looks like. And don't forget to import it at the top, just like so. How easy it is now that we have this system. We can simply say cart here, and then back in the components, index.js, in here, we can simply copy the line and say export cart. So we're now exporting the cart, and then inside of the app, we can simply import it this way. And now you know that we are passing the cart as a prop. So back in the cart component, we can expect that cart right here as a prop. So how do we know the cart is empty? Well, what we can do is we can say if cart.line items, this is an array, so we have to say dot length, is lower than, or we can say is equal to 0, right? If it's equal to 0, that means that our cart is empty. What you can also do is simply put an exclamation mark at the start and then delete this. Why does this work? Well, if the cart is empty, this is going to be 0, right? 0 is falsy, so not false is equal to true, and we get empty. If cart.items.length is anything else other than 0, like 5, 10, or anything, any number other than 0 is truthy. So if you have true here, not true is false. That's why we can use this simplified logic to show if the cart is empty. And then based on that variable, as we saw previously, we can show either the cart or the filled cart. Now, moving on, we said that we have to loop through the cart items right here. So how do we do that? Well, we're gonna open a curly brace, and then inside of there, we're gonna say cart.line_items.map. Inside of here, we have one callback function. I'm gonna put parentheses here to have an instantaneous return, not curly braces. And what do we get in there? Well, we simply get one item or one product. Then for each product, we want to show a grid. This grid is going to be of type item. So let me just finish up this grid, and it's going to have a type of item. On extra small devices, it's going to take the full width, but on small devices, it's going to take 4 spaces out of 12, which means 1 in 3 is going to show up. And then of course, if you're looping, we have to have the key. Key is going to be equal to item.id. And what are we going to show inside of this grid? Well, we're going to show a completely new cart item component. So we're going to create a new component, which is going to be our cart item. Right now, we don't have that component. So instead of this, I'm simply going to return just a simple div that's going to say something like line_item or just item.name. I think this should be good. We should see a name for each specific item in the cart. And later on, we're going to implement the cart item component. Okay, now below this container grid, we're also going to implement a new div. That div is going to have a class name of classes.cardDetails. Inside of there, we're going to have a typography. That typography is going to be of a variant h4, and it's simply going to say subtotal is going to be equal to cart dot subtotal dot formatted underscore with underscore symbol. This is going to give us the amount with a $sign. We can put all of this in one line. It doesn't take too much space. And now below that typography, we're also going to have one more div. That div is not going to have any classes, but it is going to have two different buttons. The first button is going to have a class name of classes.empty button. It's also going to have a size of large. It's going to have a type of button, and it's going to have a variant of contained. But it's also going to have one more thing. Bear with me, this button has a lot of things. It's going to have a color of secondary. So in here we can say color secondary. Now, what is it gonna say? It's gonna say empty cart. So that's what we actually put inside of the button. Now I'm gonna copy this button line below, and in here, this is going to be our different button. This is going to be the button for the checkout. So it's going to have a class name of checkout button. The size is also going to be large. The type is also going to be a button. The variant is going to be contain, but we need to change the color to primary, and we have to change the empty cart text to be simply checkout. These are our buttons. And that is also it for our filled cart component. Now you can see it wants me to implement the classes, so I think that's the next thing we can do. You know the drill. Inside of the cart folder, we're gonna create a new file called styles.js. And then inside of there, with some magic, we're simply gonna copy and paste the styles. The link is going to be somewhere next to this video. I'm sure if you copy the previous files, you should have no trouble with this one. And finally, what we have to do is in here, we can say import use styles from /styles. And then we have to use that as a hook. Const classes is equal to use styles. And we call it. Great. So now let's format this a bit and let's see if we need anything else. We're going to head back to the browser and see what do we got. This looks pretty good. We have our shopping cart. In here we have all of our items. They don't look good yet because we didn't create the cart item component, but we'll do that soon. We have the subtotal and we have the empty cart and the checkout button. This title looks a bit too small to me. Let's see why is that. That is this title right here. And as you can see, I misspelled the variant. So in here, that should have been variant. Now, if we go back, that title should grow bigger. As I refresh the page, I noticed that it said cannot read property length of undefined. That means that this line items wasn't fetched yet. To fix that, I would simply add one error check in here. We can say if no cart dot line items. So if it didn't yet fetch any items, then we can simply return, and we can return a string of loading, just like this. I think this should be able to save us from the error. But we're still gonna get an error because this line right here is still happening. Maybe we don't even need this variable. I'm just gonna take the value of that variable, and then where we were using it, down below, I'm just gonna simply copy the value, or rather paste the value. Because that's it. We sometimes have no need to create a variable if the content is meaningful enough on its own. So now this line is not gonna happen before this line, and if there is no cart line items, this is simply gonna return loading until it fetches them. So now if we get back and if we refresh, just for a brief second, maybe you saw, maybe you didn't, the loading, and then we got our your shopping cart and we got everything else. Let's create a cart item component so that the items in our cart look good. To do that, we're going to create a new folder inside of our cart folder, and we can name it cart item. You might be wondering, why did I create that folder inside of the cart and not inside of the components themselves? Well, I just like to simplify it because this component, the cart item, is only going to be used inside of the cart, so it doesn't make sense for it to be anywhere else. Same things goes for the product inside of the products. With that said, let's create a new cart item.jsx file inside of the cart item folder. Inside of there, we're going to create a new functional component with RAFCE, and at the top, we're going to import all of the things that we need from Material UI. That is going to be a typography. We already learned how to use it. It's also going to be a button, card, card actions, card content, and card media from add material UI/core. While we're here, we can also import the classes. So we can say import use styles from ./styles, and then we can create a styles.js file and simply copy and paste all the styles right in there. Now we can get back to the cart item and start creating the layout. First, we have to create the classes. So const classes is equal to use styles. We call it as a function. And then inside of there, we're going to have one card component. Inside of that card, we're going to have a card media, which is going to be a self-closing tag. Inside of there, we're going to have an image, and that image is going to be item.media.source. That is the image of a specific product. But as you might be wondering, where is our item now? Well, we're going to send it over from the cart. Instead of this div, we'll be calling our new functional component, which is cart item. And then we're going to pass the entire item right here. Remember, we're looping through all the items, and then for each one, we're passing the data for that specific item. Of course, we have to import this component. So just right here, we're going to say import cart item from ./cart item to get into the folder, and one more cart item to get into the specific file. With that, we can now go back into cart item, and we know that we're receiving the item through props. We can just destructure it. Our card media is also going to have an alt tag, and that is going to be item.name, and the class name is going to be classes.media. Below the card media, we're going to have the card content. Card content is going to have a class name of, you guessed it, classes.cardContent. And that's going to be card, not cart. We're using card and cart interchangeably a lot. Inside of that card content, we're going to have two different typographies. The first typography is going to be of variant h4. And in there, we're going to say item.name. So this is going to be the name of our item in our cart. And we can replicate this line. And below, this is going to be h5. And in here, we can put the price. Remember, the price is under item.line_total.formatted_with_symbol. Great. So this is our card content. Below our card content, we have card actions. Card actions are going to have the class name of classes.cardActions. And inside of there, we're going to have a div that has a class name of classes.buttons. I know we're typing a lot, guys, but this is just the structure. Really soon, we'll be done with all the JSX, and then we'll be moving on to payments, authorization, Stripe, and so much more. So even if you made some mistakes here, make sure to reference to the GitHub repository and then copy and paste the layout if you don't feel like typing it out, or if this is too easy for you. Inside of here, we're going to have one button. That button is going to have a type of button, a size of small, and also later on, we're going to add an on click. But for now, that button is simply going to say, this is going to be to decrement the amount of items in the cart. Then we're going to have one more identical button, but in here, we're going to say plus. And then in between these, we're going to have a typography. That typography is going to have item.quantity. So in here, we're going to see what is the current quantity of our items, and then we can decrement or increment the quantity. Great, and then just one more thing below that container, we're gonna have one more button. That button is going to have a variant of contained and also a type of button. I misspelled it here. And a color of secondary. This is going to be the button that is going to remove the item completely from the cart, so we can say remove. And I would say this is it for now. I think we can go back and see how our cart looks like with all the items in there right now. And there we go. This looks so much better. Now we have a proper cart. I noticed we're missing a few things. First of all, we need some margin or padding below this typography. And then we don't see the current number of items in the cart. We just have the buttons. So now let's go back. And then inside of the cart, first we're gonna add that gutter bottom in here. If you specify gutter bottom, that simply adds some padding below this typography. Great, so that's one thing fixed. And the second thing is this quantity. I noticed that I misspelled this, so we're gonna simply spell it correctly, save it, and go take a look. And as you can see, we have some space below the title, and also we have the quantity for our products. Next thing that we need to do before we make these buttons functional is to implement the React router. We need to be able to go back to all the products and then traverse between the products, the main page, and the cart. Because right now, we're always locked in the cart. Remember, what I did right now is simply comment out the product so we can never get back, and we have the cart. But we need to be able to move between these pages using React Router, so that's exactly what we're going to do next. In most applications, React Router is mostly going to be either in the app.js component or in the index component. In this case, we're going to be routing from the app.js component. So we're going to need a few things to implement the React Router. That's going to be the browser router as router. Then we also need a switch. And finally, we need a route. And we're importing that from React-router-DOM. So how do we use all of these? Well, let's head to our JSX. Right here inside of the return statement, we have to wrap our entire application with a router. So inside of here, I'm gonna say router and simply wrap our entire application in this router coming from React-router-DOM. Inside of here, we have this div. Then inside of there, we have a navbar. Now navbar is always going to be showing. What we have to do is switch between these two components. And that's exactly what switch is for. Switch. Switch between these two. Or rather, I can say show only one of these. So are we gonna show the products or are we gonna show the cart? And what does that depend on? Well, that depends on which route are we. We're gonna have one route for the products and I'm gonna create another route for cart. So now we have two different routes. Routes are gonna have something known as exact. So we're gonna say exact path. And what path is that going to be? So first, product is going to be our root path. So our initial path, our home, if you wanna call it. And the cart is going to be after the /cart. So what do? Well, if we are on this path, then render these products. And if we are under the cart route, then render the cart. And that's basically the only thing you have to really do to enable routing using React Router in React. Now, if we save this and go back to the application, let's see what do we currently have. We are now on the root route and we have to refresh. So right now we're refreshing and let's see where are we going to be taken to. As you can see, this is the home page. In here we have all of the products. And now if we head to /cart, then we are re-navigated to the cart. And as you can see, in here we have the subtotal and in here we have all of our items, only the ones we've added to the cart. Now what we have to do is we have to implement going back and forth, not changing the URL, but just by clicking simple buttons, because users will not know how to go to /cart. So the first button we want to add the link to is going to be this button right on the top corner. That is going to be inside of the navigation bar, so we can head to the navbar component. Inside of here, we're gonna import one thing, and that thing is going to be the link. From React Router DOM. Now, where are we going to add that link to? Well, we can add it to this button click. Usually, you would do something like this. You would just say link, and then you would specify the property, so to something. And where are we heading? Well, we're heading to /cart. And then also what you would do is you would said go to cart. So this is a link that would show up. In this case, we already have some kind of clickable thing that we want to use as a button. So in this case, Material UI allows us to say component is equal to link. And now we can add all of the properties from this link to this exact component, and it's going to behave like a link. So we just added a link to our icon button. Now we also have to add a link to our typography right here. That's our brand, that's where we head to. So in this case, we can do the same thing. We can say component and cart. We add these two things to our typography. In this case, we're not gonna go to /cart, we're just gonna go back to the slash. That's our home route. And then we also have to do one more thing, and that is, if we go back, we want to remove this cart icon if we are already on the cart. So now that we're on the cart, we don't want to see the cart again. So how are we going to figure out the logic if we're currently on the cart? Well, what we can do is import something else from the React Router DOM. And that something is use location. So we're importing the use location, and that is a hook. So we have to say const location is equal to use location. And that location has one specific property that we need. And that property is called path name. So we want to check if location dot path name, all lowercase, is equal to only slash, only then do we show the cart. If this is different than the root route, then we don't show anything. So if this is the same as the root, in that case, we want to show this icon button. So in here, what we can do is we can do some logic and then say this. If this is the case, if we are on the root route, in that case, show this whole component down below. That's it. And of course, we can do it using the ternary. So we can say if this exists, then do this, otherwise return null. But in React, there is a better way. We can say if this is true, then just use the end operator, and that's going to appear only if the first part is true. So now let me explain what do we have. Only if we're currently on the home route, only then are we going to show the button. If we are not, we're not going to show anything. Now let's go back to the browser and see if that worked. There we go, we're on the cart and there is no cart button. If we go back, cart button is there. One more thing I want to do is, we cannot see it right now, but if there are no items, I want to add a link here saying go back and add some items and then come back. To do that, we have to go to the cart, and then inside of here, where we have cart empty, what we can do is just inside of this typography, we can also add a link. Import link from React Router DOM. In this case, we're going to use just a normal link. So link, opening and closing. And inside of there, we can add this text right there. Start adding some. That's going to be the text of our link. So we're going to remove it from here and then add an exclamation mark at the end. So where is this link pointing to? It's going to be to, and then just slash. And this is going to be it. We can also add a class name, classes.link. This is going to just normalize some styling so we don't have that ugly underline and everything else. Right now, I cannot really show you how that button looks like because, well, none of our buttons are functional, right? So just right now, we're gonna focus on implementing the logic for all of these buttons in the cart, decrementing, incrementing the quantity, and also removing one specific item, but also emptying the entire cart and heading to the checkout. Let's start working on functionalities for updating the quantity of a specific product. We can go back to our app and we're going to go to the app.js. In here, we have our cart. So here we'll call some of the API features from commerce.js. More specifically, just below the handle add to cart, in here, we'll have one really similar function to that one. We're gonna say const handle update cart quantity. We can say QTY. That's going to be equal to an async function. And then what we're gonna accept is going to be the product ID and also the quantity. Now that we have that, inside of there, we again get the same thing, which is always a response from an API call. And then we're gonna say await commerce.cart. This time it's not going to be add, it's going to be update. So in here, we have to specify what do we want to update. So that's going to be product ID. And in here, the quantity. What is going to be the quantity? And we put it in a new object because quantity is only one of the things that we want to update. Now that we have that, we again just set the cart to be equal to response.cart. Just above, we also could have said response. So we can say response just to keep it consistent, response.cart. Or now that I see it, even better is to immediately destructure the cart just like this. And then we don't have to mention the response. We immediately just get the cart because we destructured it from the response object. Okay, while we're here, let's also implement all the other functions. So just below, we can say const handle remove from cart. This is also going to be an asynchronous function. This one is going to accept only one thing, and that is the product ID. And again, we're gonna get the cart after we destructure it, and that's going to be equal to await commerce.cart.remove. And what do we pass in? Well, we pass in the product ID. And I really want to stress the fact that this is truly revolutionary. Take a look at this. We are adding things, updating things, removing things, just using plain English. Commerce.cart.remove and so on. We don't have to create full backend systems and write the code for this ourselves. This is really good. And this is the main reason why I'm able to provide you with this video. Usually videos of this type would take tens and tens of hours, but now I can do this in about 2 hours, right? Great, so with that said, let's continue. We're gonna do the same thing, set cart, and we update the cart. And one last final thing is to handle the empty cart. So we want to empty the entire cart, so that's gonna be const handle empty cart. And again, that's going to be equal to an async function. This function doesn't need any parameters, it just removes the cart. Same thing again, we get the cart back after we call await commerce.cart.empty, and we call it as a function. Don't forget to call it as a function. Finally, set cart, and we just set it equal to cart. Great. Now we have these three functions which are updating our state, and we need to pass them to where we can actually call them. So all of these, if I'm not mistaken, will be calling from the cart item, right? Yeah, exactly. So now in here, I'm gonna pass them all to the cart. Yep, we can do it just like this. I'm gonna paste the names. We can even stretch this cart because it already has a lot of different things in there. So I'm gonna put it into multiple lines, just like this. And now what do we need? Well, we need to pass the actual parameters. Now, these are just the names of the props. We have nothing in there. So I'm gonna use some keyboard shortcut magic, and I'm gonna set all of these equal to their counterparts, which are the actual logic, which are the actual functions for this. Now we're passing the cart. We're also passing the handle update cart quantity, handle remove from cart, and handle the empty cart. Now, going back to our cart, we know that we can expect all of these properties. Back in the cart, I'm gonna just put them all here. Of course, we have to use comma separated values. Now we have 3 extra params right here. And where do we pass them? Well, some of them we're calling from here, but some of them we are not. For example, which ones are we calling from here? Well, the empty button is definitely going to be called from here. So what do we need to do with the empty button? Well, just go to the end of it, add an on-click listener. And what do we do on click? We handle empty cart. That is it. Great. The other two, we're gonna pass to our cart item as props. So in here, we can say on update cart quantity is equal to on update cart quantity, and also on remove from cart is going to be equal to on remove from cart. Okay, I just see that I call them handle update right there and handle remove. So I gotta make sure to rename that. And after we're done, now we know that we want to expect two new props inside of the cart item. So if we go back to the cart item, in here, now we're expecting two new props, which are on update cart quantity and on remove from cart. At this point, I would agree that we are kinda sending props too much. Like we are creating them in the app because we have to, because they're updating the cart state. Then we're sending them over to the cart right here. And then finally, we're sending them to cart item one more time. This is known as props drilling, and solution for this would be to use React context. In this video, we're not gonna focus on that because currently props drilling is not that big of a deal. We are only doing that for a few properties. If you have more of these, then it might make sense to convert to context. Great. Now with that said, let's actually see where do we need to use these. First of all, we're gonna use them right here. We're gonna add an on-click listener, so on-click, to both buttons. In here, we have to make it a callback function. And what are we gonna call? On update cart quantity. We need to pass in the item.id, and also we need to pass the new quantity. That's going to be item.quantity. And we have to do -1 for the decrement and +1 for the increment. This way, we'll be sending the new updated quantity for this specific item, and that's going to be immediately updated. The last thing is to add the on-click listener of on remove from cart to the remove item. That's going to remove the full item quantity. And in here, we can do the same thing, a callback function. We call on remove from cart, and the only thing we pass in is the item ID. With this done, all of our buttons should be functional. Let's take a look. We are back in our cart, and let's try incrementing the kettle. As you can see, even the price is increased, and we didn't even worry about. The API is doing all of that for us. We can increment again, or we can simply decrement, and then we can fully remove the item. If you decrease one more time, it goes away. But also, if you add a few items and then you want to remove all of them, you can simply click the remove button and it removes them. That's it. Now we know that remove button works. Now we know that the increment and decrement buttons work. Let's check the empty cart. There we go. Now we finally managed to see our empty shopping cart page. We can click start adding some. That links works as well. So now all the front part of our project is done. Now we have to focus on functionality of payments. What's gonna happen after we click this checkout? And let me tell you, it's not going to be easy. The easier part is behind us. Now we're focusing on payments, Stripe, creating the layout for the form, and much more interesting things. To start with the checkout, we're going to go back to the cart, and then in here, we have to implement another link. More specifically, you see this checkout button right there. Right now, it isn't doing anything. So what do we need to do with it? We simply need to make it as a component that is equal to a link. And the question is, where is it pointing to? Well, it's pointing to /checkout. Of course, this is the route we haven't created yet. So to do that, we can go back into the app.js, and then in here, we can add our third and the final route. And that's going to be the checkout. So following the structure, we can simply create a route component. It can have the exact, and it can also have the path. So path is going to be /checkout. And what do you think we'll be showing off with on our checkout route? Well, it's going to be the checkout component, which we haven't created yet. So let's first import it, even though it doesn't exist yet. So we'll just go ahead and create it right now. To do that, I'm going to collapse all the files, close all the folders, and let's do that. Inside of our components folder, we're going to add one more folder, and that is going to be checkout form. Inside of our checkout form, we're going to put all the components that have something to do with the checkout. Let's start with a new folder. The folder is going to be called simply checkout. Inside of that checkout, we can create a new file, which is going to be called, you guessed it, checkout.jsx. Now, what do we do in there? Well, inside of here, we're going to have some kind of a form that we're going to move through as we go through the purchasing process. So let's start with a simple functional component, refce. And then let's import all the things that we need from Material UI. So that's going to be import paper. We also need a so-called stepper. Then the step label, our good old typography, circular progress, that's for our spinner when we load things. Then we need a divider, and finally a button. We're gonna import all of that from @material UI/core. Now inside of here, we're gonna create the actual layout. First of all, we're gonna have one empty React fragment. Then right inside of there, we're gonna have a self-closing div that's gonna act as that padding for the navbar. So we're gonna say the same thing we always do, classes.toolbar. That simply puts the content more below the navbar so we can see it fully. Then below that, we're gonna have a main component. That main is going to have a class name of classes.layout. Inside of the main, we're gonna have a paper component. That paper is gonna have a class name of classes.paper. Inside of the paper, we're also gonna have a typography component. This time our typography is going to be of a variant H4, and we're gonna add a line which is equal to center. And that is simply gonna say checkout. Below that, we're gonna have a stepper. A stepper is a component that moves as you move through the steps. Of course, that's our stepper. So stepper needs to have a few things. First of all, it needs to have an active step, which we don't yet have. So I'm gonna set it to 0. Later on, we're gonna update this using state. And then it's also gonna have a class name of classes.stepper. Now inside of the stepper, we have to map through all the steps. And what are the steps we're gonna have? Well, there won't be many. We only have 2. So we can create them above our component. Const steps is equal to an array. First step is shipping address. And then the second step is payment in a string, payment details. These are our 2 steps. So down in here, inside of the stepper, we can call steps.map. And then we can map through the steps. In here, we get one specific step. And again, I'm just gonna have an instant return arrow function. This is not a curly brace, it's a parenthesis. There, we're gonna have a step. That step is gonna have a key of step. And finally, inside of the step, we're gonna have a step label component, which is going to have a step inside of it. So we're using that step quite a lot. This is going to generate a nicely looking stepper. If you're not sure what I mean right now, we're gonna see it in just a moment. Now, let's import the use state so we can actually traverse through the steps. Import use state from React. And then just above, we can say const active step is equal to, or rather active step and then set active step. That is equal to use state. And by default, we're gonna leave it at 0. Now in here, instead of the 0, we can use the active step. Now let's save it. And of course, you can see we have a lot of errors. We of course have to import classes. So again, let's create a new file inside of our checkout form, more specifically inside of the checkout folder. In here, I'm gonna create a styles.js file. And then inside of here, again, magically, we're just gonna copy and paste all the styles. And then back in the checkout, in here, we have to say import use styles from /styles. And then we have to say const classes is equal to use styles and then we call it. Now we have all of our styles, and if we imported everything correctly, if we're using our checkout right in here, then we should be able to see it in the browser. Let's take a look. Okay, we forgot to export the checkout from the ./components. That's in this file, index.js of the components. So right there, we have to say default as, and that's going to be checkout. But keep in mind, this time we have one more extra folder, checkout form. So to get to the checkout, we have to go to the checkout form, then to the checkout folder, and finally, then to the specific file. If we do that and then go back, you should be able to see our checkout component. Let's refresh. We are inside of the cart with a kettle, and now let's click checkout. And there we go. We have a nice looking paper here in the middle of the screen, and there is our shipping address, the first step, and then we have payment details, which is the second step. Now we have to implement a lot of different steps of the form. As we said, the first step is the address form, then we have the payment form, and then final review of the order. Let's start off by rendering two different components below the stepper depending on which step are we currently on. How can we do that? Well, we're gonna say something like const form is equal to a functional component, and then in here we're gonna return something based on which step are we currently on. So let's do it like this. If we're currently on the active step that is equal to 0, then we want to show, let's see, we want to show the component called address form, like this. And I'm not sure why did this mess up right now. This is some kind of extension I'm using. But if we're not on the first step, then we want to render the payment form. And these are going to be special components we're going to create. Now we have this form, which doesn't have these components yet, but just below the stepper, still inside of the paper, we're going to say something like this. If active step is equal to steps.length. This means if we are on the last step, then we want to show yet another new component, and that component is going to be confirmation. So we have three different components. I know it's kind of messed up, but just bear with me. So we have the address form and the payment form, which are for the first step. They're just changing. And then we have the confirmation form, which comes after you're done with all the steps. So if we're done with steps, we show confirmation. If not, we're gonna simply show what? We're gonna show the form. And we can render that as a component, of course, like this. Great. So now it's time to actually import and create these forms. To do that, I'm gonna create them all in this checkout form folder. Inside of here, we can create a new file, and we can call it address form, just like this, .jsx. And we can also create payment form, was it? Yeah, payment form.jsx. So these are going to be our two functional components. For now, in each one of them, I'm going to just create a simple functional component, which is going to say something like payment form. And then in the other one, we're going to say address form, just so we can see how it looks like. So address form, don't forget to change the name and the export. Great. So now we have these two forms, and of course at the top we have to import them. So just below this use styles, we can say import address form from /address form, and below that we can also import payment form from payment form. Now we have these two components. The last thing that we're missing is the actual confirmation. Confirmation for now is also going to be a simple functional component, so const confirmation. But it's going to be simple for now, so I'm going to declare it right here inside of this file. And inside of here, let's do something simple. Let's do a div that's going to simply say confirmation. So now we have all the three pieces of the puzzle. We have the address form and payment form, which belong to the form, and we also have the confirmation. Now, if we've done everything correctly, we should be able to see the first one, and the first one is the address form. So let's go back and see if we see anything. And there we go. There is the address form. So now, of course, we cannot navigate yet because we don't have the buttons for updating set active step. But if we had these buttons, then we would be able to move along. For now, let's just try to change it manually. Use state, active step is 1. As you can see, we have payment form, and the number 2 should be the last step. So if we go back, we shouldn't see payment form, but we should see confirmation. So let's go ahead and see if that's the thing that shows up. And there we go, confirmation. So everything works, and you can see with the steps, even this thing changes. So we have first step finished and the second step finished. Now we have to implement forms one by one. The first one is going to be the address form, so let's start with that. Considering our address form is going to have a lot of different fields, I'm talking first name, last name, address, email, city, zip code, country, and a lot of other things, we'll be using something known as a React hook form to manage the inputs. Usually, we would need to have many specific states for each specific field. This way, we'll be using React hook form, and that's going to allow us to get the values outside of our inputs. And also, as you can see, it is much more efficient using the React hook form. And it is also better than native because there are less total re-renders. With that said, let's start with React hook form. First of all, we'll import some things. So let's start by importing things from Material UI. We're gonna import input label, also a select, menu item, button, grid, and a typography from add Material UI core. Then we're gonna import, again as a named import, use form and form provider from React hook form. Great. Now that we have all that we need, we have to set up our React hook form. To do that, first we're going to say const methods is equal to use form. This is going to make sure to give us all the methods that we need to run our form. Now to create our form, first we're going to use an empty React fragment. We're going to say something like in here, we're going to add a typography, and that typography is going to be of a variant H6, and it's going to have a gutter bottom. Inside of there, we're gonna say shipping address. And now below, we're gonna have that form provider, which we imported from React hook form. That provider is going to take in, so we're gonna put an object here, which is not an object, it's really just dynamic code, and we're gonna spread all the methods from React hook form. Now, inside of there, we're gonna create a form. That form is going to have an onSubmit. For now, we're gonna leave it empty. We're gonna fill it in later. And now, inside of there, we're gonna have a grid. That grid is going to be for separating or spacing out all of our input fields. So in here, this grid is going to be of type container, and it's going to have a spacing of 3. Now, inside of each one of these, we're gonna have a special Material UI field because it has nice styling and it fits with our theme. So we have to find a way to connect React hook form with Material UI text input. For that reason, we're going to create one more component inside of the checkout form, and that is going to be custom text field. I know you think that this might be a bit of extra work, but trust me, I've tried a lot of different solutions and this one seems to be the easiest. So now, inside of that custom text field, we're going to create, again, a simple React arrow function component. It can be custom text field, and we're going to import some things from Material UI and also some things from the React hook form. From Material UI, we're going to get the text field and also the grid component. So this is from Material UI core, and from React hook form, we're going to get use form context as well as the controller with a capital C. And we're importing all of that from React hook form. Great. So what is this going to return and what is it going to take in? Well, first of all, the only thing it's going to return is it's going to be a grid, this time a grid of type item that's going to have XS12, which means only one visible input on mobile, and 2 per row on desktop or bigger devices. And then inside of there, we're going to have something known as a controller. That controller is a special component belonging to React hook form, which is a self-closing tag, and it allows us to use any other input or text field as this controller. So we can say as text field. So it's gonna take the look and feel and all the variables from the real text field. We also want to give it control, so we can say control is equal to control, and that control we're getting from const, and then with the structure control, and then we call the hook use form context. I know this might be a bit confusing if you have never used React hook form, but just bear with me. I was also feeling this way when I first started learning it, but again, it really simplifies the process. So even if you're struggling with this, don't worry, maybe just copy this part out, but the rest is gonna be definitely a bit easier. Great, so now we have the controller with text field and control, and we need to have all other properties. So each one of our inputs is going to have a full width. It's going to be full. Then we also have to give it a name. We're gonna get that through props. We don't have it yet. Then we have to have a label. We're also gonna get that through props. And finally, we have to know if the field is required or not. So we're gonna say required, also coming from props. Now, since we know that we're gonna pass these from props, we can simply destructure the props here and take in the name, the label, and the required field. And if I'm not mistaken, this is going to be it for our custom text field, which we can now import in our address form. Let's call it something simpler, like, let's just call it form input. Because we're gonna have a lot of these, we don't wanna have really a long name. So now let's import this form input inside of our address form. That's going to be import form input from /form input. Great. And now inside of here, we can simply use it. And now we're gonna see how powerful this is, and it's gonna allow us to save a lot of lines of code just by using this method. What we can do right now is we can simply say form input. It can be a self-closing tag. This is form right here. And the only thing we have to do is pass 2 or 3 different things to each form input. We don't have to worry about value. We don't have to manage the state. We don't have to do anything else. We just have to say this. Is the field required? If it is, we just say that. We have to specify the name of the field. In this case, the first one can be first name. And also we have to specify the label. So in this case, we can say the label is going to be the first name. And that is it. We can use this logic to create as many inputs as we want. You can see it is a simple one-liner. Now I'm going to put this as an empty string so it doesn't cause any errors. And now if we save this, we should be able to go back and see if we at least got something. Looks like we have one error here, and that error is coming from the address form. So it looks like we're not correctly importing it. In here, we have the form input, but we called it custom text field. So let's do custom text field. And that should solve our problem. We should be able to refresh and take a look. Okay, now we got confirmation because we changed our step to 2. So we have to go back to the checkout and reset the step to 0 so we can see the address form. And there we go. I told you it's going to be simpler. Right now, you cannot really see the purpose of using React hook form, but let me show you how we're gonna add a few more inputs right away. I'm just gonna duplicate this a few times, more specifically like 6 times, I think. This is going to be last name, and we're gonna change the label to last name. This here is going to be address 1, and the label can be address. Next field is going to be email. And of course, the label is going to be email. Finally, we have the city. So we can say city right here, change the label to city. And just below that, we have the zip code. So we can say zip and also change this to zip. We can say zip or postal code. This is just a name, so it's going to be lowercase, and this is also going to be lowercase. Now, if we save this and go back, you should be able to see how simple it is to add multiple inputs using this method. We did spend a bit of time creating the whole controlled field, but now you can see it's much simpler because all the fields were added just with 6 simple lines. And we don't have to manage the state, it is automatically managed for us once we click the submit button. These form inputs are not the only thing we're going to have. If you remember from the demo at the start, we also had some select fields. So let's add those. For a select field component, we could also create a new separate component. But in this case, I'm going to show you how it looks if you don't actually divide it into a new separate component. It's going to get just a bit messy, but we have only 3 selects, so it should be fine. Just below here, just below this form input, we're going to have a grid, and that grid is going to be of type item. It's going to have XS is equal to 12 and SM is equal to 6. We're going to have this code for each one of these 3 inputs. One thing that we're also going to have for each input is going to be the input label. For this first one, we're going to say shipping country. Then, just below that, we're going to have our select field. Select field is going to be not a self-closing tag. It's going to accept a value. In this case, we don't yet know what is the value going to be. Then we're going to say it's going to be full width. And then we have to specify the on change. I'm also going to leave this blank for now. Inside of there, we have to loop in some way through some of the values for our event fields. For example, these are going to be countries. So for now, I'm just going to leave one specific menu item here and not loop through them yet. We're going to do that together later. Menu item is going to have a key property. So inside of here, I can say key is going to be equal to, well, we don't know yet now because we're not looping. Then we're going to have a value for each one as well. So value is also going to be something. And finally, inside of there, we're going to have something like select me. So this is going to be each individual country. So this is something we're going to copy 3 times. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. First time is going to be for shipping country. Second time it's going to be for shipping subdivision. And the third time it's going to be for shipping options. And the only thing that's going to change is what values we have here, 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 and here. And of course, what we're mapping over. Let's think about this for a second. And why is this going to be hard to implement? Well, let's start from the end. You don't know which shipping options do you have until you actually know in which shipping division are you. But you don't know which shipping divisions do you have until you know in which shipping country you are. So for each change of the country, we have to change these, which is then going to change these. So all of these 3 fields work really, really closely together. And that's going to be a bit tougher to implement. First, we're going to add all of these different states. And there are going to be many for these 3 inputs. Let's start from the beginning. First, we're going to import the use state. And now we're going to have a lot of different states, 6, I think. So we have to say use state. And our first state is going to be shipping countries. And then set shipping countries. By default, our shipping countries are going to be set to an empty array. Below that, we're going to have shipping country, so only the one that's chosen, not plural, singular this time. And that country is going to be set by default to an empty string. Below that, we're going to have shipping subdivisions, again, plural. So we're going to change this, shipping subdivisions, and we're going to add subdivisions in here as well to set shipping subdivisions. And that's going to be again set to an empty array. Below that, we want to fetch one shipping subdivision. So we're going to remove the S, and in here remove the S as well. So we have shipping subdivisions and also shipping subdivision. This is the chosen one. And in here, we're going to remove the array and put it as an empty string. And one final pair is going to be shipping options. So in here, shipping options, and then finally set shipping options. That's again going to be set to an array. And below that, we're going to have shipping option and set shipping option, which is going to be equal to just an empty string as well. We now have access to all of the state fields we're going to use. Now let's use the things from the API to actually fetch all the available countries, to fetch all the subdivisions, and to fetch all the shipping options for our customers. And if you remember correctly, these shipping countries, subdivisions, and options are the things that we set up directly in the Commerce.js dashboard. We said that we can ship domestically in the United States and also that we can ship internationally to a few countries in Europe. Now, to be able to use all the API features, we're going to import commerce as a named import from /lib/commerce. Remember, this instance allows us to use all of the features. Now we're going to implement the functionality to fetch the shipping countries, subdivisions, and options using the Commerce API. Let's start with countries, of course. The first function is going to be const fetch shipping countries. Of course, we have to get the countries first. That's going to be equal to an async function, and that function is going to accept something known as checkout token ID. Once we start with the order process, we are gonna get our own checkout token ID. Like you come into the store and then you get a receipt. We get checkout token ID. We don't have it yet, but before we call this function, we're gonna create this checkout token and pass it to fetch shipping countries. So what is our fetch shipping countries gonna do? Well, first of all, we're gonna make an API call. So we say const response is equal to await commerce.services.locale list shipping countries. It's a long name, but there we go. I told you how to write it. And then in there, we have to pass in the checkout token ID. So what we get back from that? Well, we get back the response. And inside of that response, if we destructure it, we have the countries. So the question is, what are we going to do with those countries? Well, we can say set shipping countries to countries, of course. Later on in here, we're also gonna set the individual country, but for now, let's try to call this. If you remember correctly, I told you that we need to create a checkout token ID before we call this. So let's see where that is coming from. The checkout token is going to be created in the checkout component, where we have the steps and all the other parts of the form. So inside of here, you can create a new use effect. So the first thing that we have to do is, of course, go to the checkout JSX, import the use effect, and then right inside of here, we will actually create that checkout token. So you can put the use effect here. Use effect. Initially, we're going to leave it as a component did mount, which means it's only going to have an empty dependency array. It's only going to happen at the start, but later on, we're going to change it when the cart changes. So in this case, the question is, what do we want to do with it? And the answer is, in here, as soon as someone enters the checkout process, we're going to generate a checkout token. So what we have to do that is create a new function, which is going to be asynchronous. Const generate token is going to be an async arrow function. And then inside of there, we can have a try and catch block. If the token is successfully created, we'll do something in here. If it's not, we're going to simply send an error. So how do we actually create a token? Well, we first have to import the API in here as well. So let's import the commerce, import commerce from ... and I think one more time, lib commerce, just like this. And then in here, we can say const token is equal to await commerce dot checkout dot generate token. And what we have to pass in there are two things. First of all, the cart ID, and second of all, the type of the token we're generating. So in here, we need to have the cart. The problem is right now, our cart is inside of the app.js. We don't have access to it in here. So the simplest solution is simply to pass the cart as a prop. So inside of here, we can say cart is equal to cart. As simple as that, we're passing the cart as a prop to the checkout. We can use it in here. And then what we have to pass into the generate token is going to be cart.id. And the second one is going to be options, which is an object. And then in there, we say type is equal to a string of cart. That is it. This is going to generate our token. We can console log it, but let's also set it to the state. So first I'm gonna console log it. This is our token. And then I'm also gonna create a new state field for our token. Const checkout token set checkout token, and that's going to be equal to use state, and by default it's going to be set to null. So just below this console log we can call the set checkout token, and we're gonna set it to the token. Great, we're gonna leave the catch empty for now. We're gonna focus on that later. So of course we have this function here. We have to call it generate token. Why did we have to create a function in the first place if we're only calling it immediately afterwards? Well, in the use effect, you cannot use async unless it's in a new function. You cannot simply add async keyword here. So for that reason, you have to have a separate function. Great. With that, we should be able to go back and we should be able to see the token in the console. We still get the same old error. So just so we can see the token, I'm going to go back to the address form, and I'm just going to comment out all of these select fields for now, just so we can focus on the token. Now, if you save the file and if you go back, make sure to open the console, and let's go back to the main page one more time. In here, we're gonna add a few items, go to the cart, close this, and click the checkout. Okay, let's see what happened. Looks like we have some warnings here. But there we go, line 21 of the checkout JSX, that should be around here, and exactly that is our token. So what does the token contain? It contains some analytics, card ID, it says what it collects, when was it created, when it expires, the gateways we could be using for the payment, all the items in the cart currently, including the price, and it even includes the shipping methods that you can use. That's great. So now that we have this token, we have to, of course, set it to the state. We did that, but we have to pass it as a prop to our address form. So inside of here, we're gonna pass checkout token, and that's it. Now inside of the address form, if you scroll a bit up, now we're getting the checkout token right here, and now we can use it once we call this fetch shipping countries function. And when are we calling that function? Well, as soon as the address form renders, we immediately want to get the countries. So we're going to use the use effect, and we're going to say run immediately when you render. So in here, that's going to be a use effect. That's going to be of type simply component did mount, meaning that the dependency array is going to be left empty. So inside of here, what do we want to do? Well, we want to call the fetch shipping countries function, and we want to pass in the checkout token dot ID. Now, if we save this, we should be able to get the shipping countries. So inside of here, I'm going to console log countries, and hopefully we can see something in the console. I'm going to refresh the browser, and there we go. Take a look at that. We have all of the countries we added. We currently have the problem that if you refresh the page, it's not going to render the checkout, saying that in address form line 26, it cannot read property ID of undefined. That means that this checkout token is undefined. And we gotta ask ourselves, are we not including it correctly? Checkout token, that seems to be fine. How are we passing it in the checkout? Well, we're passing it right here as the checkout token. So that seems all right to me. But what we have to do is we have to make this update dynamically with the cart. So as soon as the cart changes, we also have to recall for another token. Let's see if this is the part that potentially fixes this issue. That still didn't fix it. That means we'll have to do some more debugging. So inside of here, I'm gonna console log the token one more time and see if it's even being generated. So right there, I'm gonna save this, go back and refresh. This unfortunately didn't do it. Let's see if it works when we go back to the cart and then when we click on the checkout. And usually I would skip through this debugging process, solve it myself, and then just show you the solution. But I really want to guide you to the hardest thing of programming, and that is getting stuck somewhere. So now I'm trying to explain my own thought process of how am I going to fix this issue. Okay, we obviously have the cart on line 49 of the app.js. I'm gonna clear the console, click checkout, and let's see what happens. Okay, looks like we do get the token here. So on line 21 of the checkout, we do get the token, but the problem occurs before that because it tries to render the address form while we still don't have the token, and it depends on it. So first what happens is this right here. Remember, this is the render method. So how React components work is that they first render everything. So first render JSX, then go to the component did mount, or in this case the use effect, and then re-render if it needs to. So in this case, at this point, we still didn't call the checkout token, so we still don't have it, but our address form is depending on it. So in this case, we're gonna add one more check to show this form. In here, I'm gonna say, if we have the checkout token, so checkout token and end form. This is going to make sure that we need to have the checkout token, and only if we have it, only then render the form. Now, if we save this, hopefully it should work. Make sure to refresh the page and let's take a look. And there we go. We get our form, and down below, we also get all of our countries: Albania, Austria, Bosnia, Belgium, Switzerland, Germany, Denmark, Spain, and finally the United States. Now we have to add back that select field for the country, and then based on the country, we'll be fetching all the other regions. So we can go back to the address form. We know that we're getting the countries, but this is not exactly what we want. Because take a look, these countries are in an object. We kind of want to have them in an array to loop over them. We have AL is equal to Albania, AT equal to Austria, and so on. So we want to have them in an array. So how can we do that? Setting countries in an object right here is fine, but how do we actually get the first element in that object? With arrays, it would be easy, right? We just do array 0. But in this case, how would we do it? Well, I'm gonna say this, set shipping country. So now we're setting the individual one. And of course, as I told you, we cannot simply do this because this is an object. Nor we can do this because we cannot always choose the same one. What if one country is missing? We cannot make sure that the Austria is always gonna be there, or Albania. We want to fetch the first thing from that object. So to fix that, we first have to call object.keys. And then we can say, give me just the keys of the countries. And the keys are gonna be these, AL, AT, BA, and so on. So we're gonna get an array with AL, AT, BA, and so on. And then we're gonna say, give me the first one of all of these. So now we have this properly set up. We have the set shipping countries, and we also have the one specific country. But if we go down there, and if we try to uncomment only the first field, so let's comment out the two remaining ones, inside of here, we want to have the value. The value is of course going to be shipping country, right? So we can put shipping country right here. On change, what are we gonna do on change? Well, we want to manage that. So we're gonna say on change, we get the event, and then set shipping country. And what do we set it to? Well, e.target.value. Whatever is selected, we set it to the shipping country. Now in here, we want to map over something. And the question is, what do we want to map over? Remember, countries are not an array, so we cannot do countries.map. That is impossible. But what we can do is say object.entries. Object entries is going to give us keys and values of these objects. So what do we want to get the entries from? That's going to be shipping countries. Then we have an array of arrays. I know this might be confusing, but now let's do a simple console log so I can show you what are we actually working with. Now this is not that hard when it comes to React, but this is really hard, just general JavaScript logic. You have to be good at JavaScript to figure this out. I'm going to remove this menu item for now, just so we get the console log. Now save this, go back, and it's going to show you what are we working with. As you can see, this is now an array of arrays, and each array contains the key and the value for each specific country. So why did we do that? Well, now that we have an array, we can officially loop over it. So we can say dot map. In here, we get that one key value pair. You can call it like that, key value pair. But what I prefer doing is destructuring this array, where the first element is going to be the code, and the second element is going to be the name of that country. Now that we have that, we want to return it in a new format. A new format is going to be an object. So inside of here, you can specify the instant return, and then an object. There, you can specify the ID to be equal to the code, and the label to be equal to the name. So now we have yet another array with only the IDs, which are codes, and the labels, which are names. I know this might be confusing, but let's add another console log so you can see what are we working with now. And then only one last step is remaining so we can officially loop over them. Looks like I'm missing a parenthesis somewhere. It's going to be quite hard to find it right now. As I'm getting lost with all of these parentheses right here, it would make sense for me to simply copy all of this and do it like a normal human being, not inside of the JSX. So I'm going to put this above, create a const countries, and then we can do it in here in peace. So right here, this is not going to be a console log. What we do is object.entries. We explained why we do that, to convert it from an object into a 2D array. Then we have to map over it one more time to turn it into a normal array. We get the code and the name. In here, I noticed one extra parenthesis, and what we are returning is simply going to be an array with objects that have the ID and the label. We can even console log to see how our countries look like right now. Okay, save that and head back to the browser. As you can see, we have one array with 9 different countries. Each one of them has the ID and the label. Now we can use those countries, map over them, and show each one of the select fields. Inside of here, we can open the logic block, say countries.map, and then for each country, what we want to do, for each country, we want to return a block of JSX. And that block of JSX is actually going to be just this menu item. In this case, we can say country.id is going to be the key. The value is also going to be country.id. And finally, the text is going to be country.label. Great. If we now save this, we should be able to see countries under the select field. So let's head back and refresh. There we go. You can see we have the entire form, but most importantly, we have this select field and we have all of the values populated right here. You can choose from Austria, Albania, United States. What is interesting about this is that we purposely made it a select field, because if you remember correctly, all of these countries were set up in our Commerce.js dashboard. So we're only getting the countries which we can ship to. And then once we select the country, we're going to dynamically populate all the subdivisions for that country and then all the shipping rates for those subdivisions. So for example, our next goal is when you click Albania or United States, all of the subdivisions need to be populated. For some countries, subdivisions are going to be something like counties. For United States, the subdivisions are going to be the actual states. So that is our next step. Now that we have the countries just below, we can start fetching subdivisions. So we're going to create another function, which is going to be const fetch subdivisions. That is going to be equal to an async function. And this function is going to be accepting one parameter, and that is going to be a country code. Now you know what I meant when I said we first have to have the country to be able to fetch the subdivisions. So we're going to be fetching subdivisions for one specific country. So in here, the procedure is the same. We get the response, and then we have to await commerce.services.locale list subdivisions. We call it as a function and give the country code argument right inside of there, which we'll be getting when we call this function. So inside of here, what we're getting is the response, of course, but when we destructure that response, inside of there, we have subdivisions. Just as we had countries here, in here we have the subdivisions. So now we can follow the same procedure, which is going to be set shipping subdivisions. And in here, make sure to put this as plural subdivisions. And in there, we just set the subdivisions, just like so. Great. We also want to set a singular subdivision, and the situation is going to be the same as with the countries. So we can say set shipping subdivision, singular, and then we have to do object.keys. We get the keys out of these subdivisions, and then we get the first element. This is going to be our selected subdivision. You can see this is quite similar, so that's great. Now, when are we actually going to call this function, fetch subdivisions? Well, we cannot call it immediately after the fetch shipping countries, because at that time, we won't yet have the country. So what we have to do is create another use effect. And maybe this is the first time that you're seeing two different use effects in the same function. Well, there isn't a single rule that forbids you from having multiple use effects. That is completely legal, and it's a good practice, of course, if you have the need for them. So in this case, this use effect is going to have one dependency, and that is going to be a shipping country. This says that whenever the shipping country changes, we're going to recall our use effect. So whenever our shipping country changes, then we have to call our fetch subdivisions. And of course, we have to provide the shipping country, which is in the state. Sometimes this is going to be empty, so what I would like to do is simply provide an if statement. So if shipping country, if it exists, only then call the fetch subdivisions. That is it for the subdivisions. Now you can see we're calling it. So what do we do with them? So now we have to do the same thing. We have to loop over all the subdivisions, and then we have to display the select fields based on them. The situation is going to be completely identical to countries. So we can literally copy this line, say subdivisions, and in here, we're gonna do object.entries from shipping subdivisions. And in here, the situation is going to stay the same. So if we scroll down, we can now loop through the second grid or through the second select. I'm gonna uncomment those. And let's focus on the shipping subdivision. So in here, what we can do is basically copy the select that we've been looping over and paste it in here. Of course, the value is not going to be shipping country. It is going to be shipping subdivision. Full width is going to stay the same. And then on change, we're not gonna set the shipping country. We're gonna set the shipping subdivision, singular. Make sure not to mess this with an S at the end. In here, we're looping through subdivisions, not countries. And then in here, we get one single subdivision. And we get the subdivision ID, and subdivision label. This isn't too long, so we can even put this in one line, just like this. So now we have two different maps. First, we fetch this, and only after the shipping country changes, only then are we getting the subdivisions for that specific country. If we now save this, I think this should work. We should be able to go back to the website and see if subdivisions are populated. There we go, Albania, Berat. And then if we switch to United States, it's gonna take a second and it's gonna fetch all the different subdivisions. This is great. If we go to, for example, Austria, it's gonna get all the subdivisions for Austria as well. This means that it works perfectly. The last thing is to fetch the shipping options. So for United States, it's going to be free because it's domestic, but for European countries, it is going to be international. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to do a similar thing one final time. Just below, I'm going to say const fetch shipping options. That is again going to be equal to an async function. This one is going to accept quite a few things. It's going to accept a checkout token ID, also a country, and also a region. We can set the region to be equal to null if there is none. Great. So now when we have that, inside of here, we'll be fetching the options. So const options is equal to await commerce.checkout.get shipping options. And then what do we have to pass? Well, of course, we have to pass the checkout token ID that we're getting from parameters here. And then we have to pass the options object right here, we have to specify in which country we are. So country is going to be equal to country. And then we also have to specify the region. This is going to make sure to get a specific shipping option for this country and for the specified region. Now that we have these options, I'm going to say set shipping options to options, of course. And then we want to get the first shipping option available. So we can say set shipping option. This is an array. So inside of here, we can simply say 0 and then .id. This is going to make sure to immediately select the first available shipping option. Now the question is, when do we get the shipping options? And the answer is we get them after we get the subdivisions. So we first get the countries, then we get the subdivisions, and then we get the options. So we can use another use effect here. That use effect is also going to have a dependency, and it's going to run once the shipping subdivision changes. So in this case, we were changing this once the country changes. And in this case, we're changing the options once the shipping subdivision changes. So right inside of here, we're going to say if shipping subdivision. So if it exists, then we want to fetch shipping options, not countries, options. And we want to pass in checkout token .id. This is coming from the top of our function from props. Then we want to pass in the shipping country, which is in our state. And finally, we want to pass shipping subdivisions, or more specifically, one singular shipping subdivision without the S at the end. Great, that's it. And finally, we have to loop over it. Looping over this is going to be just a bit different, but we're still going to do it at the top. We're not going to copy the line, but this is what we're going to do. Const options is going to be equal to, in this case, we have shipping options dot map. So why are we immediately mapping over it and not doing object entries? That's because shipping options are an array by default. And maybe to show you that, it would be best if we just simply console log the options immediately to see what they are. So here, I'm going to say shipping options. So now if you're fetching this properly, you should be able to see shipping options in the console. And there we go. Address form, JSX22. These are our shipping options. As you can see, we have an array, and inside of an array, right now, we have only one element. In this case, we have all the countries, and we also have the description international. In this case, we also got one more console log. This is the same thing. But if we switch this to United States, we're going to get a different shipping option. In this case, we always have just one option. So now what we have to do is we have to map over them. And for each option, we want to merge together the name of the shipping, domestic, and also the price for that specific shipping. So in this case, what we're going to do is loop over the shipping option. I'm going to call each specific shipping option SO for shipping option. And this is what we're going to do. We want to return immediately one object, and that object is going to contain the ID. ID is going to be equal to shipping option.id, and the label is going to be equal to, now bear with me, a template string. Inside of there, we have a shipping option.description, and then we're going to add just a dash, and I'm going to put this in parentheses, another template string, and then in there, we're going to say so.price.formatted underscore with underscore symbol. This is going to give us the price for that specific shipping. This is going to be it for this specific line. It is already too long. I know it's getting a bit complicated. I told you this part is going to be a bit more complicated when it comes to just JavaScript, because it is tough to do all of this complex logic. But now we have these options, and finally we can go to our last select and we can loop over it. So for now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this part and simply paste it in here. It's going to be almost the same thing. Value in this case is shipping option. On change is going to be equal to E, so we get the event, and then set shipping option, and then e.target.value. Finally, in here, we will be looping through options, and then we get one specific option, and everywhere where we have subdivision, we change that to option. This is it. Now we're properly looping through options. And now I want to point your attention to the difference between these 3 selects and these 6 inputs. All of these inputs are custom components. They're one custom component. And while we were talking, I just noticed that we don't even need this required prop. Required is always going to be simply set to true because all of our fields are immediately required. So we can get rid of this completely for all fields. So again, take a look. 6 different fields, and then we have 3 different selects. The logic for these selects is much more complicated, and we have much more duplicate code because we haven't separated it into a new specific component. But then, take a look. We can even put this in one line because it's simple. So this is it. This is just to let you know that you can always create specific new components, custom components that are going to accept some props and are going to make your JSX seem simpler as it should be. In this case, we're going to leave these selects as they are because the logic for actually doing all of this with them is kind of complicated. With that said, let's take one final look at our address form. We have our shipping address here. We can input all of the values: first name, last name, address, email, city, and the postal code. Then you can choose from all of the countries your shop is shipping to. Let's choose United States. All of these values are immediately populated for us. Let's choose California. And then you can see the shipping should be 0. It is automatically switched to 0. But if we switch back to Austria, it's going to switch to international. So now we know that our checkout, or at least the first part of the checkout, is absolutely fully functional. We are ready to add the next button right there, and then we can move to the payment details. Adding the button is going to be simple. Below all of this, below this form, we're going to add one break tag. Then we're going to have one div, and that div, we're going to do some inline styles. In here, this is going to be display is equal to flex, and also justify content is equal to space between. These are the only styles we are using in this file, so just so I don't have to create a new style.js, I'm going to do this inline. Now in here, we're going to have 2 different buttons. Inside of that div, we're going to have 2 different buttons. The first button is going to be of a variant outlined, like this. And then the second button, which we're going to have just below, is going to be of variant contained. The first button is going to say back to cart, and the second one is going to say next. Great. Now, of course, when we have the back to cart, in here, we have to specify that component to a link. So we have to say our component is a link, and then we have to say go to, and then go to /cart. But this one is going to be of a type is equal to submit, which means that this is going to submit our form and we are ready to go to our next step. Of course, this one is going to be of a color primary, and that is it. Now let's save it and let's see if our buttons work. Now let's import this link component. So just at the top, we can go ahead and say import link from React router DOM. Now we can save the file and see if our buttons work. The back to cart button is going to work perfectly, but the next button is not going to work just yet, because in here, the only thing we did is we said this button is going to be of a type submit, but what are we submitting? In here, if you take a look inside of our form, our onSubmit is empty, so it's not going to do anything. What we have to do with React hook form is we have to say methods.handle submit. And that's going to accept one specific function, more specifically callback function. That callback function is going to have the data for all the fields populated right in here. So this special handle submit belonging to methods of React hook form is going to have the data object that is going to contain the information for all of these specific fields. Then what do we want to do when we have that? We want to call one function that's going to bring this data back to our checkout. So we need this data right in here. And how are we going to receive all of that data right here? Well, we're going to create one new function. So just below this use effect, we're going to say const next is going to be equal to, And then in here, we're gonna pass this function as a prop to our address form. Of course, the function is going to accept the data. So what are we going to do with that data? Well, we're gonna set it to the shipping data right here. So all the shipping data that we get from the address form, we're gonna create a new state field right here, const shipping data, and we can say set shipping data. All of that data we're gonna set right here into one use state field. That use state is at the beginning going to be an empty object. Okay, so once we get that shipping data, what we have to do to get that data populated is simply say set shipping data, and then we use that data that we passed right in here. Of course, once we set the shipping data, we also want to move the set active step by one further. So just above the next, I'm gonna create two new functions. One function is going to be called const next step. And that function is simply going to set the active step to step plus one. And when you're setting the state in React using the previous state, you have to call it as a callback function. And then in here, you get previous active step. So what you can say is simply return previous active step plus one. This way, we are not mutating the old state. We're using it as a previous state plus one. Just below, we can create back step. And that way, the only difference is that in here, we put the minus. So now we know that after we set the shipping data, we're gonna call the next step. Okay, and our next function, we have to pass it into our address form. So right here, I'm gonna say next is going to be equal to next. Now going back to our address form, in here at the top, we'll be receiving this next right here. And then when do we actually call that next? Well, we call it on the submit. So right here on submit, we need to call this next function and give it some of the parameters. So what are we going to give it? Well, first of all, we're going to give it a new object, and that object is going to have all of the properties from the current form spread. So we want to spread this data into this object. Why are we simply not sending in the data? Well, because data contains only the values for these 6 fields, but we are managing these normally using state. So we have to create a new object where we spread the properties of data, and then we also pass shipping country, singular, shipping subdivision, and also shipping option. That's why we have these singular values. So later on, it's going to be easier because we are passing exactly what we need. So what is currently happening? We are calling this function from here, passing all the necessary data. The function declaration is right in here into the checkout. We're getting all the data, setting it to the shipping data, and then now we have access to this state, which we can then use to pass it to our second step of the form, which is the payment form. Based on this shipping data, our payment form will be able to finalize the order. So our next step is to start working on the payment form. In here, we'll be using Stripe. Starting with the payment form, we're first going to import all the necessary things from Material UI, and in this case, Stripe. From Material UI, we're going to need only a few things. We're going to need a typography, a button, and a divider. Then we're going to import elements with a capital E, card element, and also elements consumer from add Stripe React Stripe JS. This is Stripe React, but we also need something for just general Stripe. And that is going to be import load Stripe from add Stripe and then just / stripe.js. So make sure to not mix these up. Now that we have that, we can start creating the layout for our payment form. Inside of here, we're going to have one React fragment. And then below that, we'll have one new, and this is going to be, trust me, the last component of this project. In this case, this component is going to be called review. So this is going to be just a general list of all the things that we have purchased. So while we're here, we can also import that. That's going to be import review from /review. And of course, we can go ahead and create it. So right inside of the checkout form, we can create a new file, which is called review.jsx. That review is also going to be a React functional component. So we can create a RAFCE, and we're going to import a few things from Material UI. It's going to be a typography, list, list item, and list item text from @material UI/core. Then in here, we're also going to have a React fragment. At the top, we're going to have a typography. So typography, it's going to be of a variant H6, and it's also going to have a gutter bottom. It's going to simply say order summary. Below that, we're going to have a list. That list is going to have a property of disable padding. And then just below that, we have to loop through all the products that we have in our cart. And if you remember correctly, we have access to all the products inside of the checkout component inside of this generated token. So now we can actually make use of this token. It's stored right here inside of the state as the checkout token, and we have to pass it over into our payment form. So in here, we're going to say checkout token is equal to checkout token. Now we can go back to the payment form. We are expecting a checkout token here, and we can then pass it as a prop right towards here. So checkout token. Now, if we go back to the review, in here, we have access to our token. What token allows us to do is to, in here, loop through all the items. So we can say checkout token dot live dot line underscore items dot map. Then we get one specific product for each map iteration. And what do we do with it? Well, we want to display some JSX. So in here, you can put an instant return. And for each product, we're going to display a list item. That list item is going to have some inline styles. It's going to be style and then padding 10 pixels at the top and bottom and 0 on left and right. And it's also going to have a key. Key is going to be equal to product.name. Inside of that list item, we're going to have a list item text. That is a self-closing tag. The primary text in there is going to be equal to product.name. And the secondary text in there is going to be equal to, and we're going to put a template string. That's going to be quantity. And in here, we can use that template string and say product.quantity. Just below that, we're going to have one more typography. It's going to be of a variant body2, and there we're going to simply say, and there we're going to put the price of our product. So that's going to be product dot line underscore total dot formatted underscore with underscore symbol. Below this map, we're also going to have one more list item. So in here, list item. This one is also going to have a style of padding 10 pixels on top and bottom and 0 on left and right. And this list item is going to have a list item text. The primary is going to be simply total, just like that. It's a self-closing tag. And finally, we can have one last typography. This typography is going to be of a variant subtitle 1. And the style is going to be equal to font weight of 700. This is going to make our text appear bold. Inside of there, we want to put the total price. And we get the total price by doing checkout token.live.subtotal.formatted with symbol. This is going to give us the total price. I noticed I have a typo here, so if we fix that, our review component should be good to go. Okay, so let's go back and let's see if this actually works. We have our cart, we have all the details here. I'm gonna fill in the name and the shipping address. Let's go for Albania this time, and let's click next. There we go. In our cart, we have one kettle and one book. Oh, unfortunately, quantity is undefined. So looks like I misspelled that. Let's fix the quantity. So in here and somewhere else, I guess. There we go. In here and in here. If we now save this and go back, let's see what are we gonna get. One more time to the checkout. Next, and we get quantity 1 and quantity 1. This means that all of this is working perfectly. We now have our review of our order. Just below that, we'll be using Stripe elements to create a nice looking card input, which Stripe is going to process, and then that's going to allow our users to pay with their cards. We're going to divide this review with a divider. So in here we have a self-closing divider tag, and then below we're going to have a typography. This time our typography is going to be of a variant H6, and also it's going to have a gutter bottom and a style of margin 20 pixels on top and bottom and 0 pixels on left and right. And in here we can simply say payment method. So the first thing was the review of the order, and the second thing is payment method. Just below that, everything else is going to be done by Stripe for us. So inside of here, we can use Stripe elements. These are pre-done elements, and Stripe simply does that for us. Inside of the elements, we're going to pass the Stripe property, so Stripe, and that is going to be equal to the Stripe promise. We didn't yet create that Stripe promise, so we can do that right now. Just above our payment form, in here, we're going to create a Stripe promise. Const Stripe promise, and that is going to be equal to load Stripe. In here I misspelled it. This should have been load Stripe, and now we need to pass our public key from Stripe store. I'm gonna leave this be just for a second, and then later on in here we're gonna put our own public key so that the Stripe knows what's our public key. Moving forward with the layout, just below this elements we're gonna have something known as elements consumer. That elements consumer is going to have this JavaScript block of code in there, and it's going to have a callback function. That's simply how it works. That callback function is going to have one more return. So just take a second, look at this code, and feel free to write it down not to make any mistakes. We do this because in here as parameters, we accept something from Stripe. We're going to destructure that, and we're going to get elements, and we also get Stripe from here. All of this you can find in the official Stripe documentation for Stripe elements. So now that we have elements and we have Stripe, inside of here we can create our form. So just like this, form. Later on we're going to add the onSubmit to this form. Inside of here we can specify this card element. It's going to be a self-closing tag. We imported that right here at the top, also coming from Stripe. I'm going to add a 2 break tags here, so we can have some space between the card. And finally, we're going to have some buttons. So just below, I'm going to create a div. This div is also going to have some inline styling. So style, display is going to be equal to flex, and also justify content is going to be equal to space between. And now we're going to have 2 different buttons. First button is going to have a variant of outlined, and it's simply going to say back. So we want to go step back. Maybe we didn't add everything we need to the cart, so we simply say back. The second button, we're going to create it. It's going to have a type of submit, and it's also going to have a variant of contained. The button is going to be disabled if we have no access to this Stripe. So this is going to make sure that people cannot just mash the button if we don't yet have the Stripe instance. The color of this button is going to be primary. The button is going to say, now we're going to put this into multiple lines, and the button is going to say pay. And now in here, we can take the amount from the checkout token. Checkout token dot live dot subtotal dot formatted underscore with underscore symbol. We're already used to this long string, and there we go. Now we have 2 buttons. So what are our buttons going to do? Well, this one needs to have an on click, and we're gonna add it. On click, what we want to do, we simply want to go back step. This is a function that we're gonna pass from our checkout. So if we go back to our checkout right here, remember we created this back step function. So we can pass it over as a prop to our payment form. Right here, back step is equal to back step. Now if we go to payment form, in here as a prop, we'll be receiving the back step and we can call it. That's going to make sure to go one step back. Let's save the file and see how our form looks like. Damn, this is already getting so much better. And it is functional. We can move back, we can click next. Of course, if you haven't filled it, it's gonna ask you to fill it. And now you can click next and you can see, there we go. Our form is right here, automatically generated by Stripe. In here, you can enter your credit card details, the expiry date, the CVC and the postcode, and that's going to be it. You're ready to pay. But of course, not yet. There's one step before that, and that is that we have to actually include our Stripe. So we have to enter our public Stripe key. For that, we're gonna head to stripe.com and we'll create a free account. Once you go to this stripe.com, of course, you'll be able to create the account and get the public key, but let's just for a moment appreciate this amazing looking website. This is one of the best, if not the best design I've ever seen. Looks really clean and modern. With that said, you can click this start button right here. You can enter your email, full name and password to create an account. In this case, I'll just sign in. Once you're in, you'll most likely have to get your email verified. So make sure to verify that email that you get back on your address. So on left side sidebar, you click developers. Once you're here, you can go ahead and click the API keys. And there we go. This is our publishable key. You can just click to copy and then we can head back to our code and paste it in there. We're not gonna simply paste it here because this should be private. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to the .env file. In here, we're gonna say React app, and we can say something like Stripe public key. And then in here, you can paste that public key. After you do that, you have to open the terminal, press Ctrl+C to close it, and then restart it. That way our variable is going to be generated. Then you can copy this and we can go back to our payment form. Now in here, as we learned, you can do process.env and then name of the environmental variable, in this case, React app Stripe public key. Now that we connected our Stripe, we can finally create that one handle submit function. So const handle submit, and this is going to be the final function that's going to finalize the order. So when are we calling this function? Well, we're calling it on the submit. So right in here in this form, we're gonna say on submit is going to be equal to, we get the event, and then in here, we wanna call that handle submit function, and we need to pass three different parameters. The first one is going to be the event of the click or of the entire form. Then we're gonna have the elements, and then finally Stripe. So we need all of these Stripe dependencies for this to work. Now that we have that, we of course know that in here in the function, we're getting the event, we're getting the elements, and we're also getting the Stripe. First of all, always in React, we do this event.prevent default. This is going to make sure for our website not to refresh after we click the button. Then we're gonna do some error handling. So we're gonna say if no Stripe or if no elements, we're gonna simply return. We're gonna go outside of this function. We're not gonna do anything. Stripe cannot do anything if we don't have access to one of these two things. Then we're going to get our element, and we can do that by saying const card element is going to be equal to elements.getElement. And simply what we do is we pass in .card element. The card element, if you remember, we're importing from right here. Now we're gonna use Stripe's API to create a payment method. To do that, we can say const this structure, the error, and the payment method from, so equal to, await stripe.create payment method. And we pass in the options object where type is going to be equal to, in this case, card, And also the card is going to be equal to card element variable, which we just created. Now that we have the error and the payment method, we can do one if else check. So if we have the error, then we simply want to console log the error. That's going to be enough. Else, if we don't have the error, we want to create one final object containing all of the data, containing all of the items we have in our cart, containing our customer. So who are we? Who is buying it? The first name, the last name, all of the address details, containing all of the shipping details, containing the shipping options, and finally containing the payment information. We need to store that in one final variable, and we're going to call that order data. That's going to be an object, and in there, let's start one by one. First, we have list items. List items will be getting from checkout token.live.line_items. Then we want to know who is our customer. So we can say customer is equal to an object. Customer has to have a first name, and in here, make sure to not use the camel case. So make sure to have the name as lowercase. First name is going to be equal to shipping data dot first name. Then last name, also not uppercase, is going to be equal to shipping data dot last name. Then we have the email. Email is also equal to shipping data dot email. Do we need anything else in our customer? I think that's going to be it. So you can add a comma at the end. And then just below, we can specify all of the shipping options. So now we can say shipping, and it has to have a name. So in this case, let's do name something like primary shipping, just like that, because we have only one option for international and for domestic. Then we can specify the street. Street is going to be equal to shipping data dot address 1. This address 1 is coming from our address form, if you remember correctly. There we go. Okay, with that, we also need to have the town underscore city, and that is going to be equal to shipping data dot city. Moving further, we have a few more things, so we could even put this into multiple lines as it's getting too long in one line. We have a county underscore state, and that is going to be equal to shipping data dot shipping subdivision. Then below that, we also have a postal zip code, and that is going to be equal to shipping data dot zip. And finally, we have one final thing in our shipping object, and that is going to be the country. Country is going to be equal to shipping data dot shipping country. Okay, that was a long object. Below that, we're going to have a fulfillment. And in here, this is also going to be an object. In here, we just specify the shipping underscore method. And our shipping method is going to be shipping data dot shipping option. So we're getting all the data from the shipping data, from the checkout token, from anywhere we can. We have to have all of that data sent over to the Commerce.js. Below the fulfillment, we're also going to have a payment. Payment is going to be one more object, and in here we're going to say gateway is going to be equal to Stripe, just a string of Stripe, and then Stripe is going to be a nested object, and Stripe is simply going to have a payment underscore method underscore ID. And that is going to be equal to payment method dot ID. That payment method we're creating right here when we call Stripe dot create payment method. And that is going to be it. We have this huge object. And what we have to do is one last final time, we have to call our Commerce API. That Commerce API is going to be called inside of the app.js. So inside of there, we have to create that function for fulfilling an order. So right here, below the handle empty cart, we can create a new function, which is going to be called const handle capture checkout. That is going to be an async function, which is going to accept a checkout token ID and also the new order. It's going to have a try and a catch block if something goes wrong. In the try block, we're going to try to fetch the incoming order. So we're going to say const incoming order is equal to await commerce dot checkout.capture. And as always, we're going to pass in this checkout token ID so that we know about which order are we talking about. And then we're going to pass the new order. Once we have the order, we want to set that to the state. So just above, we're going to create one final state field right here, const order, and set order is equal to use state. And this is going to be just an empty object at the start. Now we can use this set order right here to set our incoming order to the state. So we say set order, incoming order. Once we create an order, we also want to refresh the entire cart. So if the order is done, we cannot have all the items stay in the cart because the order is actually done. So to solve that, we're going to create one more function above, which is going to be called const refresh cart. And that's going to be equal to an async function. In that function, we're going to have a new cart, and we just have to await commerce.cart.refresh. After you do that, we can finally set cart is equal to new cart. Remember, we already have the cart in the state. If you take a look at here, we worked with that quite a lot, but now after we actually finish the order, we have to refresh the cart. So where are we going to call this function? Well, just after the set order, we're going to call refresh cart. Of course, it's good to have good error handling. So just at the top, we're going to create one more state field, which is going to be error message and set error message, which is going to be equal to use state and simply an empty string at the start. Then we can simply say in here, set error message is going to be equal to error.data.error.message. I had to console log this error bit to come up with this, but this is the final message. In here, we only get meaningful information why the error occurred. So now that we have this handle capture checkout and that we have the order and error, we have to pass all of these things to our checkout. So right now in our checkout, we're passing only the cart, but what we want to pass is going to be the order as well. So we say order is equal to order. Then on capture checkout, we want to pass the handle capture checkout. Then we also want to pass the error. So the error is going to be simply error message. And now, of course, in the checkout component, we have to get the order, the on capture checkout, and the error. So now we can go back to our checkout. In here at the top, we know that we are expecting these fields, so we can just add them in one line. And some of them will have to pass over to our payment form. Let's think about which ones exactly. In this case, we only have to pass in the on capture checkout. So just below, let's find our payment form. There it is. And we're going to say on capture checkout, on capture checkout. So now if we go to our payment form, scroll to the top, now we're receiving what to do on capture checkout. And the only thing that it accepts is going to be two parameters that we specified in that function. If you remember, we're going to call on capture checkout. The first thing is checkout token.id, and the second is order data. So the full data for the entire order. We need to have that to be able to fulfill the order. And finally, once we do that, we also want to move to the next step. So I kind of missed this. We also want to pass the next step. So in here, I'm going to take in the next step as well. Go back to the checkout, and we're going to pass this function next step. We're going to pass it right in here before the back step and save that. That way we'll be able to move further once we actually complete the order. I also noticed that I didn't declare this function as an async, although we have the await, so we definitely need to do that. And with that, I think our form should be ready to go. We should be able to create a new order. Of course, we don't yet have the actual confirmation message. You can see that we're missing that here. But more importantly, the logic for the actual completion of the order is fully done. That should work. What we can do right now is do one final test of the entire checkout process, adding the items to the cart, going to the cart, and then finally adding them to the checkout and purchasing them. But there's one more thing we have to do before we can do that. You can go to the settings of your dashboard.chek.io, and then in here on the left side, you should be able to see the settings icon. There, you're gonna head to payment gateways. Inside of here, you'll have to enter your credit card information so that Commerce.js can connect you with Stripe. This is required to finish the transaction process. If you don't have a credit card, or if you don't feel comfortable giving away credit card information, don't worry. At the end of this video, I'm going to create a mock checkout process so that even if you don't really complete the purchase, we're going to get some kind of a confirmation message. With that said, I would still strongly encourage you to follow along with this video with a credit card so that you can get the confirmation email and all the other features that the Commerce.js offers. Don't worry, absolutely no money is going to be taken from your account. We can also open the Stripe's dashboard. Inside of here, you can copy these two keys. You can click on this one and paste it right here. And then you need the second one, which is the test key. You can copy this one as well, and then simply paste it right there as well. Once you do that, you can save it. And now there's only one more thing we have to do. At the start of our project, we added this public key, check public key, more specifically the Commerce.js key. What we had to do instead is go here to the fourth icon, the same as before, and then to the settings. Inside of here, last time we took this key, but what we should have copied was this sandbox public key. This is going to make sure that all of our transactions are only sandbox, only for testing. So you can go ahead and paste that link right here. So it's not going to be public key, it's going to be public key underscore test. With that said, you can again close your terminal and then rerun the application. And now our transaction process should be completely done. And let's test our app out. I'm going to add one keyboard, one messenger bag, and one mouse to my cart. Looks like we had the book already, and now we can check out. If you go right here, we can enter our standard information, and then let's go with something like United States, and our John Wick is from California. Now you can click next. In here, you can see we have the total for all of our items, and now you can enter your credit card number. Stripe's default demo credit card number is just 4242. Keep pressing that. And now you can click pay. Let's take a look and see what's gonna happen. This is really good. We were taken to the confirmation. But now let's go back to the Commerce.js and see if our cart is cleaned. And it actually is. There are absolutely no items in the cart. And considering we are using Commerce.js and they're doing an amazing job in e-commerce, both the store owner and the user should receive a confirmation email. There we go. Take a look at this. I just opened my email and in there I found this. All the information about the order, all the items, shipping details, which card did we use, everything is in here and ready to be shipped. With that said, there are only a few small things left for us to do. Let's start with the confirmation. Of course, we don't want to just have the div that says confirmation. We want to have something meaningful. In this case, I'm going to create an empty React fragment. And then inside of there, we're going to have a div. Inside of that div, we're going to have a typography. And that typography is going to be of a variant, which is H5. Inside of here, let's leave a nice message. Thank you for your purchase. And then in here, we want to get the name of the user. So we want to do something like first name and also last name. Later on, we're going to fetch these from the order execution. Down below, I'm going to put a divider right here, and I'm going to give it a class name of classes.divider. Below that, we're going to have one more typography, and this typography is going to be of a variant subtitle 2. And this is simply going to give us the order reference. Of course, we're going to get the reference number right here. It needs to be dynamic. Below that, we're going to have one break tag. So this is going to be a break to add some space. And finally, we want to have one button. That button is going to be of a variant outlined. It's going to be type is equal to button. and we want to have it as a link, and it's going to say back to home. So this button is going to simply navigate to the home. We learned how to do that. Component is equal to link, and now inside of there we say to and just /. This is our home. This is our full confirmation, but now we only want to show this if we have a fulfilled order. So to do that, we can just at the top say if order.customer. So if order.customer exists, only then do we want to show this. Otherwise, we want to do something like this. We're going to have a new JSX block, and we're going to have one div. That div is going to have a class name of classes.spinner. And it's going to have one component inside of there, and that is going to be our circular progress. This simply means that while we don't yet have the order done, we're going to have a spinner, because taking the order takes some time, maybe a second or two. We don't want to have our user to stare at a blank screen. We are going to give him something to look at. That's going to be a little spinner. Now we have our confirmation, but it's not always going to be all sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes there are going to be errors, and that's normal. But what we have to do as developers is we have to handle them properly. So I'm going to change this from const to let, and then down below, I'm going to check if there are errors. And remember, we're passing these errors through props from the app.js. So if there are errors, in that case, I want to show something different. We're going to show an empty React fragment, and then inside of there, we're going to have a typography. That typography is going to be of a variant h5, and it's simply going to say error, and then error, just like this. We're going to have one break tag to give some space, and below we're going to have the same button that leads us to home, so we can copy this button. I just noticed that we don't have the link imported, so just at the top we can import link from React router DOM. And now let's see where this error is coming from. So let's go back to the app and see if we really do have that error. In here we have error message, and if I remember correctly, we are passing that error message as an error, so that should be good. That's great. In this catch, we can simply console log the error, and now we are nicely handling these errors. I also noticed in the console that we have one often appearing warning from Material UI, and that is that we need to add a default value to our controller. So in here, I'm just going to add a default value field, and we're going to set it to be an empty string. And one more thing we need to do before we do a final test of the entire checkout is to go right here to our confirmation and actually use our customer's information. I completely forgot about that. So inside of here, we can enter all of the details. In here, we're going to first spell this properly, purchase. First name is going to be stored under order.customer.firstname, all lowercase. And then the last name is going to be under order.customer.lastname, and also being lowercase. Inside of here, the ref is stored under order.customer_reference. And I think that's going to be it. Let's save the file and let's go admire our great application. We're going to go through the checkout process one more time, add a few items, go here, try to remove an item, increment the number of items, remove it completely. Again, our John Wick is buying a lot of things recently, but we're just testing with him. We're gonna try with Germany this time. Let's choose a specific subdivision and let's click next. So far, everything looks really, really good. We can enter our credit card information. And finally, we can click pay. Take a look at this nice looking spinner. That looks really good. And finally, thank you for your purchase, John Wick. And then we have our order reference. And with that, our John Wick became a happy customer and he also received a confirmation email. Now we can go back to home and we can keep buying. Finally, let's see how our app looks like on mobile. Considering we are using Material UI, it should look really, really good straight out of the box. And would you look at that? We almost didn't have to do any extra work, and it immediately looks like it has been made for mobile. So we can add a few items, we can go to the cart. This also looks really good. We can go to the checkout. Okay, our form is just a bit out of place. It kind of goes outside of the screen, but I think Material UI has a really easy fix for us. The only thing you have to do is go back into the checkout JSX, import one more thing, and that thing is called a CSS baseline. That's really Material UI's magic. Inside of here, just below this opening React fragment, you can do a self-closing CSS baseline component. And if you hover over it, it says kickstart an elegant, consistent, and simple baseline to build upon. Save the file, go back to your browser, and take a look at how Material UI is doing its thing. They provided us with this nice light grayish background, and they put all of this in place. This looks really good. Now we can continue testing our mobile form. Let's go next. The second step of our checkout form looks extremely mobile friendly as well. Let's add our credit card details and go to the checkout. There we go, click pay. Here's our little spinner. And thank you for your purchase, John Wick, order ref, and we can go back to home. You've just built a fully functional e-commerce store. Congrats! Before we deploy this application, let's do two more things. First is just a small fix. I noticed that if you refresh the page after you complete the checkout, you won't have the cart anymore, and that's going to cause the problems. So what we have to do is right in here, instead of this console log, we're simply going to say history.push, and then we're going to push to just slash. So we're going to let you know, go back onto the home page if you're on the checkout, but if there is an error. Okay, of course, to have the history, we have to import use history from React Router DOM. The same as with the location or with any other hook, you have to say const history is equal to use history. And that's going to allow us to re-navigate. This is basically like a link, but you don't have to click it. It just happens as soon as this block of code executes. So if there is an error, then we push you back to the home page. And the error is mostly going to occur when you actually do the order, but then refresh the page, and then Commerce.js will not be able to generate the token because the cart is empty. And the second small thing we want to do before deployment is see how our application behaves if we don't have the credit card. But now I deleted it, and I want to see what's going to happen if you have no credit card entered. So I added a few demo items. I'm going to click checkout, and let's see what happens. I'm gonna enter my first name and all the other information and click next. Now let's enter the credit card information and let's click pay. In this case, you'll be stuck with this never-ending spinner. And that's not something you want. So we want to find a way to mock the successful transaction if you currently have no credit card enter and if the transaction cannot really be completed. What I personally think is the best solution for this, if you still want to have a complete application, is to create a specific timeout. So let's say that, for example, if 2 or 3 seconds pass, then we're gonna say, okay, thank you for your purchase, it is done. In that case, we have to start a timeout when we actually click the pay button. So our pay button is, if I'm not mistaken, in the payment form right here, and that is this handle submit. So right in here, we should be able to start a timeout, and then after a few seconds pass, then we want to change something. So we're going to have a function in the checkout, which is going to say something like const timeout, and it's going to be equal to an arrow function. Inside of that function, we're going to have a set timeout. It looks like this. You say set timeout, you provide it a callback function, and specify what's going to happen after the timeout runs out. In this case, we're going to change a specific state field. So I'm going to say const is finished and set is finished, and use state, and by default is finished is going to be equal to false. So now what we can do is go right here. Instead of this console log, I'm going to set is finished to be equal to true. And then, based on this is finished, we can show something else in here. But first of all, we have to call this timeout function as soon as we click the pay button. We can do that by passing it as a prop to our payment form. So in here, our last prop is going to be timeout. We pass it like this. And then in the payment form, we receive it as a prop at the top. And then we can call that timeout right in here after we're done with the checkout. With the circular progress, we're going to add one more ternary. So we're going to say or, and then in here is finished. If this thing is finished, we want to show a new block of code. So I'm going to leave this here. And if it's not, we're going to show the same old circular progress. Now in here, you should be able to enter the block of code which you want to happen once you mock the transaction. So this transaction is not going to be real, but we want to show something. And in this case, I'm going to copy the entire confirmation, but we're going to remove all the order details. So we're just going to have thank you for your purchase. We're going to remove the names and the order ref, and the button to the home is going to still be there. This should work. I know it's a bit of a complicated logic, nested ternaries, but this was just a fix for the people who didn't enter credit card details. Now, if we go here, click that, we're going to wait 3 seconds after we click the pay button. But first of all, let's enter our credit card and let's click pay. 1, 2, and 3. Thank you for your purchase. This works perfectly. If you're just using this to show it in your portfolio, but you don't want to enter your credit card details, this is it. This is the full flow of the application. You have the purchase, and now you can head back home. Amazing. For the deployment process, we'll be using Netlify. Netlify makes it so easy to deploy your front-end applications. The only thing you have to do is log in or sign up, and the process is going to take less than a minute to deploy your site. After you log in or sign up, you're going to go to your sites. Maybe you have none here, I have a few. And then in here, you're going to see want to deploy a new site without connecting to Git, drag and drop your site folder here. The only thing you have to do is drag and drop the folder, but we cannot drop this entire React application. What we have to do first is run npm run build. This is going to put our whole application in a nice package that's going to be easy and fast to deploy and launch for the people on the web. When your application is built, you can go ahead and right-click this build folder and click Reveal in Finder or Open in File Explorer on Windows. That's going to open your folder, and then you simply have to drag and drop your build folder right here. Now you're gonna see what I meant when I said it's gonna take a few seconds. As I talk, this should be uploaded, and there we go, it is. Before I launch the deployed application, I'm gonna show you one trick. Head to Site Settings, and then in here, change the site name. In my case, I'm gonna do something like Commerce.js My Store. Save it, and there we go. Feel free to really change the name to anything you want, make it personalized, make it your own, change the styling, add your own items, and that is it. Our application is deployed and fully functional. If we weren't using test keys from Commerce.js and Stripe, people would be able to buy these items immediately. But if you want to make this into a real store, changing the keys definitely is not a problem. Well, after all, you built this whole thing yourself. To finish this video off, I would like to show you a real commerce store created using Commerce.js. Take a look at this. See how much life can you give into a website and make it into a real commerce store with categories and with everything you need to launch your online business. This looks really good. Let's click Shop Now and see what else does this offer. Take a look. This is all built using Commerce.js. I just had a simple look, but you learned all the functionalities. So now if you want to give it your touch, you can definitely do so. For the end of this quite long video, I would like to thank you guys so much for watching, for sticking till the end and actually building this, learning, adding projects to your portfolio. If you came to this video and if you really liked it, definitely feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I would like to see you in the next one. I also want to thank the team from the Commerce.js, not only for sponsoring this video, but for creating such an incredible piece of software. Using Commerce.js, Even if you're not a backend or a full stack developer, you can create a beautiful and a fully functional e-commerce store. That was it for this video. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.